Mr. Seeger, you guys ready?
Yeah.
Mr. Tathan, you ready? Mr. Tathan, you ready?
Yes.
Okay. Ms. Feathers, you ready? Check, check. Good evening and welcome to the regular scheduled meeting, September 12th, 2022. After a brief moment of silence, Ms. Pam Feathers, Vice President, will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Please stand. I pledge allegiance
No recognitions this evening. Next will be delegations. I'll remind everybody what will happen is you'll have 5 minutes to address the board. Ms. Varner, our Assistant Superintendent, will be keeping time. When it reaches the 1 minute mark, I'll just hold up my finger for one so that you know where it is. At the 5 minute mark, then you would relinquish your time to speak. Also, we have a list where I think some of you may have signed in that's already to speak, and some of you may not be speaking. So as we go through that list, if you don't want to speak, just tell us, okay? Just because I'm not sure. So first on it will be Nicole Shea, and that is dealing with concerns with lack of transportation for Rollsburg area intra-county transfer students seeking to attend Kingwood area schools. Ms. Shea, you have the floor.
Good evening, Preston County Board of Education members and superintendent. My name is Nicole Shea, and I'm a mother of 2 Preston County students. We have come here this evening to discuss the lack of transportation for Rollsburg area intra-county transfer students seeking to attend Kingwood area schools. My son is a 6th grade student that transferred from Rollsburg Elementary School to Central Preston Middle School. Although we have supported Rollsburg with the lack of staff, rate of replacement teachers, and combined grades, we fear our child's education is suffering. It has created the problem of a substandard education, forcing some parents who care about the quality of education to leave, to look at other Preston County schools, to see the differences, and to know our son would not receive the same equal opportunities. To not only experience the same opportunities, if not about the content they are learning, but the characters they are developing. Within the first 2 weeks of school, Paxton can already see the advantages of attending Central. Every report card Paxton has received at Rollsburg always says, finishes his work independently and eager to help others. While that makes us proud of his nature, it's not his place to teach. Not all teachers are effective, and specifically from COVID, children have been pushed through, creating learning gaps, making the next teacher's job that much harder. At Rollsburg, there is no next teacher. It's one teacher for 3 grades trying their best to bridge the gaps. Some students do well in smaller schools with combined classes, while some can thrive and blossom in a larger academic setting. For example, Central Preston offers CTE Exploration Ag-based courses, the school letter that is maintained by the students, as well as a podcast production and yearbook. The band program prepares the students for high school level performances, while Rollsburg was missing a band director for most of the year last year. They also have a music lab offering keyboarding and choir. The students utilize a 5 72-minute block period days where they are with different teachers and different students. My son, for the first time, feels like a small fish in a big pond versus a big fish in a small pond where he can bounce his ideas off others. Let's not forget their superior advantage to athletic programs and their high-ranking WVGSA scores that continue to flourish and exceed year after year. When seeing all the positives Central has to offer, it became an easy choice for us, as well as our son and others. So why now is busing become an issue? Transportation to and from has been provided in the past and is currently for some students. Transportation is being provided to other inter-county student transfers in small numbers. Bordering counties are willing to bus our students for out-of-county transfers, Hindering education forces us to create strategies to overcome this obstacle. A time for everyone to work together with openness and fairness for a solution. With a new superintendent and new board members, new policies can be made. The board has the power to create new guidelines, not follow the previous administration. Thank you for your time to address my concerns.
Thank you. Okay,
Is that all? Do I sit down now?
yeah,
Okay.
thank you. Next is Miss Ruby Knotts requesting a bus stop on Tunnel Hill Road in Tunnelton. Oh, I'm sorry, I got out of order. Ms. Hemingway, you'll be next. That was my fault.
We live on Tunnel Hill Road, which is where the VFW is. The bus used to come down our road. Then there was no children on our road. We used to have a bus stop right at the end of the road. Well, the bus or whoever decided it was too dangerous for the bus to stop there, even though it stopped there for about 60 years. So now the bus stops at WW Service Station. Well, our kids has to walk down the side of the road to get on the bus. That is more dangerous than the bus stopping at the end of the road. We did have a bus to come down that road. Then we had no kids. Now we got 8 children on our road. And they decided that the bus could not come down that road because it's not 2 miles. Well, we pay taxes the same as anybody else does. We have 8 kids. The bus used to come down that road, but now it won't come down that road. There's no reason why it can't come down like it did before. It's in the same shape as it was before. So it's ridiculous that they think these kids can walk down the side of the road. It's not too dangerous, but it's too dangerous for the bus to stop. I mean, that's ridiculous to me. Now, I don't know what you all think, but I know what Brad thinks because, you know. But to me, we have 8 kids on that road, and it's too dangerous. I mean, would you like your kindergarten and first grade walking down the side of the road with the big cold trucks and stuff? I don't, and we go to the schoolhouse 3 times a day. We take them up to the school in the morning, we go back up in the evening, pick them up, and go back up the 3rd time to pick the one up that goes to Kingwood. That is ridiculous because we are taxpayers just like you all are. That's all I got to say.
Thank you, ma'am. Miss Dee Dee Hemingway.
I was going to say, Mr. Huggins, based upon the nature of Mrs. Hemingway's request, I think it would be best served to consider going into executive session.
Okay, can I hear a motion to go into executive session?
Yes, I'll make the motion to go into executive session.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay, it's been properly moved and seconded to come back into session. Mr. Kisner?
Oh, yes.
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 Yes. Okay, doing,
6:48, Mr. Huggins.
okay, 6:48. Report back from executive session. No decisions were made. However, we are asking and requesting the superintendent to provide further information on the 9/26 board meeting concerning the Rollsburg transportation. That way, we can come back to it, and so that you know that meeting will be at Brewston on 9/26. So hopefully that will help. Okay, at this time, if Mr. Plum, if you would come forward, Ms. Knotts presented before you were here. Would you please come and address the situation, sir?
I'm going to pull the.
Do you have questions for me? Is that?
Can we pull the pictures out?
The parent made we had a parent make a request about a special, a bus run up Tunnel Hill. We would like information as to why that was changed for consideration in our intervention.
Sure. The best I can tell, it's been at least 15 years since we've traveled that road. It was pulled, Mr. Helmick, I believe, was transportation director at the time. I do not have the specifics as to why it was pulled. I can only speculate to that. I went out and checked out the road. I took pictures. I think you were provided with those.
We're going to provide those, put them up there in a second.
Basically, to give a little bit of background from what I've gathered, is over the past 20, 25 years, we don't have as many bus drivers as we used to. That's a fact. And when people say things like, well, I hear it all the time, a bus went down my road 25 years ago, and it probably did. But we don't have as many bus drivers. And the other fact that we have now that we didn't used to have, school started in your local communities at 8 o'clock, and you had pretty much since 6:15 until 8 o'clock to get there. We all have to turn and burn and go to Preston High now, and with fewer bus drivers. So over time, roads have been pulled back in all areas of the county, and parents just have to come out and meet the bus along the more main routes. My two concerns with that road is the sight distances don't comply with the state recommendation on 2 or 3 areas in the curves. And basically, if you meet a car, you cannot pass. And somebody's got to back up
Mr. Plum,
a long distance.
Mr. Plum, if there's any specific images or references, everything that you'd submitted to the board can be pulled up there if need be.
I tried to take some images with, I mean, we can go through each of them if you'd like, with the bus in the road. And, you know, some places it's possible to pass. Other places it's just not. And, I mean, this was a kind of a bright fall day. It could be worse in the winter. I'm sure it will be.
Wait till he's done, please, and then we'll come back, because you didn't use your 5 minutes.
That definitely shows in several areas in that road. That's just one of them that, I mean, there's just not room to get over, even in the summer. The road, the residence in question is basically about a quarter mile to a bus stop on one end and about .28, you know, a little over a quarter to a bus stop on the other, which makes the road about a half mile long. There's 2 bus stops near the end of one road and one near the end of the other. The state recommendation is, you know, we can have parents come up to 2 miles to a bus stop, and this would be basically a quarter mile each way.
If I understand correctly, you're saying your safety concern is that the places we're stopping, we do not have enough room behind due to curves in order for
No,
somebody
we don't
to
have enough
see-
sight distance around the curves or over hills. I mean, at 25 miles an hour, I think there's a chart up there and everything. I think it was 300 feet was the minimum recommended state. We don't have that anywhere near that on that road for, basically, you could not stop in time if you were coming around a turn or over a hill. I mean, the car coming at you could not stop in time. And that's at 25. Actually, I think I took a picture. The recommended on this road is 20 miles per hour.
And so I guess the other consideration is that ultimately, this likely results in the children walking the road. I don't know the
Or the parent,
situation,
I don't,
or
it depends on
driving them.
the age. I mean, if it's below
Right.
4th grade, the parents would have to come with them.
Right, okay. So I'm saying, do you think that is a safer situation for I understand the concern safety-wise from us, from the bus stopping with being able to see over roads around hills.
Well, I believe the safest would be if the parents transport them to the bus stop.
Right.
If that's not possible, then, yeah, I mean, they'd have to walk in people's yards. That would be the
Right.
safest.
Do we know if the whole road has the ability for people to walk
I
off the
do
side
not
of the
know.
road? Okay,
I do not know that. I know there are no sidewalks there.
okay.
Any other questions? What's your recommendation, sir?
This was voted on many years ago, pulled by board approval, so it had to be voted on. I don't see any recommendation now that we reinstate it. If we do so, we may have to hire bus drivers because we'd be altering several routes.
How does that flow happen that several routes are altered?
We have several intersecting there. I mean, if we come through on one, it kind of is a domino effect that delays things getting to the school. And I've spoken with the drivers. I believe one of the drivers is here tonight. Is that accurate? What I'm,
You're saying the travel of the half-mile road delays the process enough that we don't make the next pickup or swap or
Yes.
whatever, is that correct?
Yes. And again, it's not that you can travel straight through and turn and go to the school. Depending on, you have to go places after that, and you just can't turn that bus around anywhere.
Right.
I mean, some places you have to just continue out the road a few miles before you can come back the other
Right.
direction.
Right.
Any other questions from the board? Ms. Warner, I don't think she used her 5 minutes. Do you know how much time was left? Okay, ma'am, you would have Ms. Rhodes, you'd have another minute and a half. Wait a minute, are you signed up? Okay, and who are you? Okay, you would actually have then 5 minutes by being a different person, because you're on the sign-up list.
Okay, well, I know, it was saying first off, since I live on Pell Road, that my, thoughts shouldn't really be counted. But my daughter might have to go to my mom's house after school, something would come up. So, I think I do have a right to talk. But, the road is, I heard that wasn't as many kids on the road, that's why they quit running the bus routes. And then I heard that the road was too narrow. The road is not any more narrow than what it was 15, 20 years ago. Actually, it's better now than what it's ever been. It's paved. If they can go on other roads, I don't see why they can't go on Tunnel Hill Road. They go on other roads that's less than 2 miles wide, long. I don't see what Tunnel Hill Road makes a difference from any other road. I think our kids should count just as much as what the other kids do. They're not, it's not like they're high school kids. First, second, and third grade. And there's another third grader that, lives on that road. These are little kids. They're not high school kids that can walk down to the end of the road safely. And, to meet down there at WW service, these kids are not old enough to walk down Route 26 whenever you have these idiots that live around here now flying up and down the road. So, I just don't see where it's any more dangerous coming up a narrow road. Tell me a wide road in Preston County. I live on Pell Road, and it's just as narrow as Tunnel Hill, and the bus comes down through there and up through there every morning. That's about it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
It was not an accident.
If I may respond to the First Lady since she was on the agenda. Your kids matter the same as every other kid in the county. Just to be clear for both of you, your kids matter the same as every other kid in the county. Whatever decision goes forward has nothing to do with how much they matter. If you listen to the presentation from our bus director as we're considering it, there are other factors that every kid in the county gets considered. And I'm not trying to deliberate or go out, I just speaking with the First Lady who had spoken to be clear.
No, are you signed up?
We need the president runs
This
the
is
floor.
about the same situation. So you want to tell me that it's not safe for a bus, 7,000, 8,000 pound bus, look at this little man right here? So you'd rather a car to hit the bumper of that bus or this little guy? So the only reason I come here is so I want you to see this face, because anything could happen tomorrow. My car could break down. They might have to walk down there. But I just want you to see, because if it happened to any of your kids, you'd be the same way. You cannot promise what would happen after, because this is my life, everything. Nothing else matters the same as any of your kids or grandkids, sorry. But I just don't see why you'd put the safety of a 8,000 pound bus over this little boy and my daughter. And I got another one at home. I work every day in Morgantown, so I can't be there. And by the time I get home, they're done off work. So everybody don't work in this county. So that's all I got to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on through delegations. Next would be Miss Ian Robb. And again, I'll remind everybody, we're doing 5-minute segments, which I know Ms. Robb knows, but just as a reminder, coming in executive session.
I brought notes this time so I don't digress. And the last time I spoke with the board, I told you my objections to the 90 summative, 10 formative grading policy. So I don't see any need to go through that again. So I will spare the board that. What I want to know, though, I have some questions, and obviously I don't expect to get them tonight, but I'd like to know the answers at some point. And one, when was it determined that this mastery learning, if that's indeed what this is, was determined to be the best option for Preston County Schools? And I'd like to know who made that determination and why it was so determined. I'd like to know where the determination to make the 90-10 grade weighting plan, who made that determination and why? Why is that the best strategy to use? Since all of us at Preston and I have now set our computers to weighted in that regard. When was the 90-10 determination made for the high school? Teachers found out about this several days before school started. And some I've spoken with worked last summer making lessons and rubrics and everything that goes along with the lesson. And now, they're pretty well ruined, at least in part. So I still remain confident that a simple point system to be determined by the teacher involved, weighted by the teacher involved, within the parameters of the grade scale of the county, 90, 80, 70, 60, if you weight your assignments with that in mind, then I don't know why that can't be a weighted system. I think it still hurts kids, hurts teachers too in their effectiveness, but it does hurt children. And since COVID, it's been my experience, and all the time the kids were out of school, they aren't expecting to work all that hard for a grade. And one way to get them to actually do something is to assign a grade to it. By saying, oh, well, it's worth 10%, or it's not worth anything at all, but it'll really help you on the test, sometimes does not translate into the brain of a high school kid in the way that it's targeted to. Teachers, I think, are professionals. We go to school and spend a fortune to learn how to teach, how to grade, and somehow it's demeaning to be told, this is what you have to teach. Here are your standards. This is how you have to teach. This is how you have to grade. So what's left? What's left? We turn into robots. So what I would like the board to do in closing is find a way to return the grading of student work to the purview of the teachers who actually have those students. Teachers who actually know their curriculum, teachers who know their students, and teachers who know best how to meet the needs of both of them. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are we allowed to ask questions?
Yes, Ms. Robb.
Ms. Robb, how has this changed the 90-10 plan affected teacher morale at the high school?
Well, I can only, there has been no survey of which I'm aware, but the teachers that I've spoken with, it's pretty well destroyed morale, at least with regard, to that. we still care about our kids, we still care about doing a good job, but we seem to have our hands tied behind our back by these mandates. It probably wouldn't be a bad idea to survey morale at the high school.
We have some answers to these questions.
What was that last statement?
I said it might not be a bad thing to survey the morale at the high school.
Thank you.
The ones that you can,
I think I plan to address it.
yeah.
Okay.
Point of time when it's discussed.
Next will be Ms. Deanna Hirschman.
Hi there. How are you guys tonight?
Good.
All right, I'm here because I read in the journal that Ms. Robb had spoke to you all about the 90-10 grading policy. You know, I didn't realize that she had spoke at the last board meeting. So I read the article in the journal, and that prompted me to email you guys because I was concerned myself because I do not care for the 90-10 grading policy. I do not understand it, okay? I would not want to be graded that way. So I don't want to grade my students that way. I, like Ms. Robb, what is the 90-10? Who decided that? Why not 50-50? Why can it not be, why do I have to go in and change my grading scale 90-10 when I've always just weighted things? You know, if this assignment was 20 points and this quiz was 50 points, I don't understand the 90-10. Now, we were not given information why we were using this or why this was the best policy, you know. And, you know, Mr. Martin, I've had your son, 2 sons in class. Ms. Feathers, I've had your son in class. I've had Trey in class. Would you want your child just graded 90-10? You know, let me find this here. We are supposed to be promoting 100% kids 100% of the time. How does a 90-10 grading policy help support student success? To me, this 90-10 is setting them up for failure. And I'm just not okay with that. So here I am sticking my neck out because that's what I feel like. You know, if I come to you or if I say anything about what is said at PHS, I am the toxic person or the cancer of the school. You know, because I ask questions. I'm like, I don't like this. So I'm just here because I'm concerned. And there are other teachers that would like to speak out. They're just afraid to speak out. Any questions?
Mrs. Hirschman, I do have one question.
Yes?
In terms of the notification from me, I just want to be correct in this. I was notified concurrently with the board rather than in advance of the board. Would that be accurate?
No, what was that?
I was notified in that same email.
Yes,
Had
you
had
were.
Had you had any pre-discussions with me prior to that?
No,
sending
I
that
did
email?
not. I sent a message. When I emailed the board members, I included you in that email.
Correct.
Yes.
But, and the one thing I would say is, one thing that had been questioned in terms of some things that had come along from an administrative standpoint was that people were being discouraged to approach the board members.
Yes.
But I would say that within our policies, there are certain provisions in terms of certain chain of command procedures that an issue of that nature should first be addressed with building administration, then brought to the district office attention, then to the board. Would that be accurate?
That's accurate, yes.
Okay. I just wanted to make that point as well. But Mrs. Hirschman, I truly see that this is an issue that concerns you. And I understand, you know, that there are some concerns that I plan to, you know, certainly address the issue at the point in time when it comes into the agenda. And I respect the fact of what you and Mrs. Robb have communicated. And I think that certainly in your heart that you have your kids' best interest in mind in, you know, what you're bringing forth here. I would want to say that I also think the decision was made to try to move in that manner. I think we're well-intentioned as well. What I think we need to talk about tonight is kind of the manner in which this was brought about, and maybe some procedural things that could have been done, looking back at the situation, and maybe things that need to be done before this would advance forward. So I certainly feel that we respect any information that came from you know, during the course of this delegation, and we certainly will continue to talk about this issue as it appears on tonight's agenda.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Martin, will these specific questions be answered in your presentation, or
I
will
mean,
they be
yes, I was
afforded-
going to say, I think some of the things that Mrs. Robb availed, I
If
mean,
they're-
I'll certainly try to, and I've asked Mr. Seymour to be available, and if the board would afford him any time to speak to the matter, I think some things he could certainly speak to as well.
Okay, my only concern was if we don't address something specific that we do have the answer for, will they be afforded the opportunity to speak out later in the
I would say a
agenda?
few things that Mrs. Robb brought up in terms of the timeline for a decision-making towards mastery learning. This issue first came to the forefront in, I believe, October of 2020. And in that instance, a very similar proposal of mastery learning was brought before the board.
Yeah, is this 90-10 mastery learning? Is
What's
that
that?
what it is? Is the 90-10 mastery learning? Because I don't know.
I mean, Mrs. Hirschman, I think that there are elements of this, mastery learning, again, is primarily designed to assess, how we are grading, how we are assessing our students. In the instance, I think what needs to be, what's being considered here is the type of assessments we're using to determine if a student has truly mastered a skill. Homework, for example, is something that I know that within our policies, we're not required within our policies to grade homework. We're required we can grade our homework. We at the very least must provide meaningful feedback to the students. If we're going to assign those things, we have to provide meaningful feedback to that effect. That's an element of this in the fact that homework was something we're saying there was going to be a lesser value on homework. There's some things with homework I think that are maybe outside of sometimes you don't know the circumstances in which that homework was completed. Did the child simply collaborate with another, when I say collaborate with another kid, I know when I was in high school, did I look off somebody else's paper before I came to class? I mean, I don't, but some of those things, if those are given a high valuation, the concern would be is does the student truly, have they mastered the concept? If a student walks out of there with an A, with a high percentage of that grade determined with things that aren't necessarily a direct correlation to their knowledge of the content area, I think that maybe is at the root of why this process was at least to be considered. I think that, one thing that Mrs. Robb asked is in terms of the timeline for this discussion, at least administratively and at the district level, this was something that was looked at with experts in the field for the duration of last year. Where I think where the missing element is teachers needed to be afforded with those training opportunities. Our board members need to be afforded with those training opportunities before we would proceed, full tilt towards this. There needs to be an understanding. The questions that you had during the course of your presentation need to be answered for you to be able to potentially get on board with this. I think, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think you need to have a greater understanding of why these things are being proposed. I mean, would that be accurate?
That's accurate, but I don't feel like tests should be 90%.
Well, what I would say this, I don't know that tests should be the only determination. I think tests, I think projects, I think papers, I think, any number of those types of activities that the teacher deems meaningful in determining if the student truly has an understanding of the concept. So I don't know that we want to necessarily pigeonhole it specifically to tests, but I mean, there's elements of that. I mean, and you work in CT, of course, for a student to achieve, for example, certifications, Microsoft certifications, one requirement is the test.
Right.
So, I mean, that's an element of it. Now, again, I understand what you're saying. You don't want that to be the only element considered, or an element that's considered that high of a percentage. And I think that's a discussion that's ultimately going to need to be, occurred amongst the faculty. There's a procedural process for this that we'll discuss a little later in policy. It's policy 3-10. A curriculum committee could be devised that is encompassed of members of the PHS staff that are determined by the faculty senate. So I think those are things that need to be considered as maybe some of the procedural processes that brought us here. And if they maybe haven't all been fulfilled, that maybe there's a requirement for those things to be fulfilled before this is fully enacted. And that would also give the opportunity for potential training that may be necessary. That gives the opportunity for this committee to determine if this is the right step. A committee that's encompassed of maybe people that are both in favor of it and against it. And I think that would be, if we go down this road, and I think if that's, ultimately something we would look at, I think those are things we would ultimately want to require through this process. And I know that Mr. Seymour and I have had that discussions in recent days. These are some things that we likely are going to have to contemplate if this is something that's going to be brought forth moving forward. But, you know, the mastery learning decision, you know, to Mrs. Rob's question, this was something that from a training standpoint at the district, you know, administrators came and felt that this was the proper recourse. And Mrs. Rob, I've known you a long time, you're a great educator. I honestly believe that there are concepts of this that we came up with that would ultimately be beneficial to students. I truly do. You know, I wouldn't advocate for it as such if I didn't. So this is not independently a decision made by Mr. Seymour or anyone in particular at PHS. You know, I don't want to say that at all, because this is something that our county entered into administratively. We reviewed those things.
When I first heard about this, I did email Mr. Seymour about my feelings about it, and he asked me to talk to Mrs. Bishop, who's the assistant principal overseeing special education, which is what I am currently doing. And I talked to her at length. Then I came here to the work session when I planned to talk to you, but then it ran long and I couldn't.
Right.
But in my mind, I did attempt to do the chain of command before I got you.
Well, I think too is, you know, again, a lot of the concerns that are being expressed here, again, that's things that you're going to work out through that potential committee process where you determine, okay, this is a concern, this is how, you know, with this collection of staff members, administration, counseling staff, that can we figure a workaround here that's workable if we think this is in the best interest overall of the school? And that, you know, again, that has yet to be determined. But I would say this, I will take ownership in this as well. You know, this was something that went through a training process last year. When I was named superintendent, I should have certainly been more hands-on in my communications with the principal of my largest school in the district. I will take ownership of that. You know, Mr. Seymour, I know you and I have had dialogue on some things. I won't even call them missteps, but things that we probably are going to need to do moving forward if this is the ultimate goal and this is the ultimate direction that we're going to take here. You know, I think it's all of our goals here to try to do this thing the right way. And we're not trying to ram this down at this point. I think it is going to be our intent to try to work through this in the proper process. And I think Mr. Seymour and the administrative staff are very open to that effect. You know, again, this board will ultimately have to make a decision if that is the best direction in the timeline, you know, if that's the process that we would follow. There would be some requests I would make of the board when we get to that point, but, you know, really, that's where I'm coming from with this. I don't want to point fingers at anyone and say this is somebody's fault why this maybe is not unfolding the way we all would like to see it unfold. You know, ultimately, anything that comes out of it, that's on me, ultimately. I have to own that. I have to take that on. So, you know, I'm very willing to work in conjunction with our board, with our building administration to, you know, and with our staff to come to an amicable agreement as it relates to this, you know, whether this is immediately or certainly most likely over time.
So if we're not where we need to be with the 90-10, why did we need to go in and put that into our grade book, and we're doing that now?
Well,
Can I jump in here for just a quick question? Because I've already had this conversation with you, Mr. Martin. First of all, Ms. Hirschman, thank you for coming today.
You're welcome.
Is it your impression that this policy is already mandated? When you went into your classroom this morning, were you under the understanding that it had to be 90-10?
Yeah.
Thank you.
That needed to be put into our Schoology grade book by last Friday so that they could look at it by Saturday.
So this was a requirement that you had to fulfill. In your estimation as a teacher, if you would choose not to follow a directive of an administrator, what would be the consequences of that?
Oh, I'd probably find myself in hot water, you know. I'm sure I would get written up, you know.
And I'm hearing.
And, you know, I may. Yeah, insubordination.
So I'd like just some clarification moving forward that this is not a proposal that I believe that we are considering, because it's not a proposal that has come to the board, but it is a change that has been enacted, so it's in effect policy. And I think we have teachers here that can attest to that. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So let's be clear on that. This
I don't think-
policy is in effect.
But I don't think that this is in question that there was a mandate made. I mean, Mr. Seymour is here. I don't think that that's in question. Was this? Was there a direction to do so? There was.
And at this point, honestly, this is in the public content aspect of delegations, so we won't be making action here. However, it is on the agenda here a little bit. So we're not trying not to answer, not to reply, but give us a little bit, because at this point, we're not supposed to, as far as a board, okay? So with what Mr. Tatham's
as the
asking,
vote,
he is correct. I'm not questioning that. But we want to get to it more specific in a little bit and be addressed by the board as a whole. I also want to thank both of you. In a real quick comment, I honestly believe, and I think and the board members could speak differently if they disagree with me, we're here for everybody. That if it's a student that wants to address us or a teacher. The one thing I would also encourage, and I know you typically do, which is follow the chain of command. And I'm saying that because I've known you for however many years. But we do need to make sure we do that. As an example, even as a board member, I tried to make sure, that's why I stopped here, to make sure that we don't mess up legally and do too much under this section, okay? So if you bear with us till we get down there, and then this discussion will take a different phase.
If I may ask two questions before she departs. Whatever grading you've used, 80% weight to your test, 70% weight to your test, 60% weight to your test, why have you never petitioned for that to be the mandate across the school if you felt that was the best way to do yours?
I don't know.
I mean, do you feel like that would fit everyone, like the way that you've chosen for your coursework?
Oh, no. I don't think that would be fair
So
either.
the way that you designed it was specific to your curriculum and your subject matter in that?
Yes.
Okay. And you had pointed out that in October of 2020 or November in 2020 is when this concept started being discussed.
Yes.
But you only recently understood that it was a mandate as of the faculty senate meeting this year, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. It had been a discussion, you had heard about it, but not that it was mandated or
Yeah,
going to
like at the
be.
beginning of the year, that's when this 90-10 came about.
That's when you found out the mandate portion?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Anything else?
No?
All right.
Okay,
Thank you,
thank
Mrs.
you.
Hirschman.
Okay, moving on. We need, yes, ma'am.
At all.
Okay, again, thank you. Moving on, Mr. Mike Bittinger. I hope I pronounced that right, did I? Bittinger, I'm sorry. I will have that right. It may take me a meeting or two. Mr. Bittinger will be dealing with the safety and security update. The floor is
Evening.
yours, sir.
I'm just wanted to come and update the board on what's being done from a point of security and safety planning. Since I was hired July 1st, of course, this was a new position. One of the things that's mandated by the state was our emergency plans were completed and submitted. The templates for those plans were submitted to the state on time by August 1st. I've been an ongoing process doing assessments on the schools to see what we have, what we don't have, things that need improvement is from the standpoint of safety and security. Some long-term goals, updating systems, getting systems to integrate and work together, making needed repairs of things that perhaps are lacking or due to age have just exceeded their life. Probably one of the most widespread things that I've done since starting is implementing the standard response protocols. I believe you all got some information on that. A lot of that is, should have gotten a poster and a book regarding that. I've been meeting with, presented that to the principals at the Principals Academy. Also met with the custodians that they're in service, the secretaries, and I've been working my way through the school safety teams. We've gotten these posters out to the schools, provided some videos for the teachers to present to the students so they understand the new protocols. The gist of those protocols are that we've gotten away from code words, color coding, and it's all plain language now. That way, anybody that's in these buildings can understand what's going on and what the emergency is at any given time. This is kind of a nationwide move toward this to get rid of those type things and go to plain language. And I think these 5 protocols we can use to handle just about any situation that we would come across in the schools. I won't go into the particulars of it. I'll be happy to answer any questions you have about it. Some other things that I'm working on updating the ALICE training, which is a part of this emergency plan. There's an online component of that that we will push out to the staff and eventually to the students. I'll be attending a instructor training for that, so I can personally go and teach it along with SROs. We can get that information out to the students and the staff, and eventually build to the point where we're actually doing some drills and things like that. But first, we need to provide that training before we even go to that level. Also met with different law enforcement agencies, emergency management, just to touch base with them, make them aware of what we're doing, just have a in-person communication back and forth so we can all work together. Also worked with transportation and just talking about it, different places where we may have traffic flow or pick-up, drop-off issues at the schools, particularly some of the paving projects that have been going on. We went out and assisted a couple different times with traffic direction just to make sure things were going the way they should and we didn't have issues there. Also working on making sure that we're keeping accountability and updating our card systems and our key systems so we can secure the buildings. Working with maintenance to make sure that some of our systems, windows, doors, and things are in working order. Identify what isn't in working order and try to get those things repaired or replaced. There are some things that are probably going to take some time, or there's some bigger projects. I've also met with all the principals over all these protocols and trying to work with them on a regular basis as to their issues at their particular locations. They all have unique things going on at each individual location, trying to help them through what hurdles they may have. Also met last week with the counselors and communities and schools personnel, just to talk about some prevention, early intervention, some things like that, what's going on that they're seeing, anything that we could help with. One of the things that actually came out of that meeting, and I don't want to speak out of turn, but was looking into the possibility of doing a drug awareness program or something like that, but we're at the very lowest stages of even discussing that. I have some resources of a program that's available, but but we're not even to the level of rolling that out yet. Some things that would be included in that program could possibly help with some of these busing issues or this vaping. There is a component of that that deals with vaping. It's not just drug awareness, it's vaping. There's parts of it that deal with cybersecurity and things like that to educate the students, try to reach them at a level and educate them about those types of things. That's in a sense what's been ongoing. I'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have, or
Do you have a timeline that the staff and students will all be fully trained and gone through the ALICE?
it's my hope to roll the online component of that out sometime around the 1st of October. Most of the staff right now has a tremendous amount of online training they have to do, so I don't want to pile on another training at this point. I'd like to push it down the road a little bit.
Have they all practiced the standard response protocols that were the,
I don't think they've all practiced it. I have not actually given a training to every staff member yet. A lot of that has been pushed out to the principals and hope that they'll.
so we have some that are
There's some
to
different.
practice that and
There's
some
some
that
different
aren't?
levels of training, and it's still ongoing. I've met with a lot of the safety teams to work out some drills and some in-person training to go out so I can reach more and more of the staff. So it's still an ongoing process.
Is it, okay, that's just a little concerning that everybody in the building doesn't, are they all doing the same thing?
That's what we're trying to push out to them. We've also provided videos and some things like that to where the videos are also training. But if you're asking if I've personally went and trained them, no.
Okay. Do we know how that's being addressed, Mr. Martin? I mean, if there were to be an emergency in the building right now. do
We've
they pull
enacted,
out-
we've enacted a protocol so far. I mean, we had a situation where it ended up being
Yes.
a kind of a false alarm type situation, but we've already had to
But
put.
they're
through-
following the
Stop.
Yep. We used that verbiage over the phone. That's how they communicated.
Okay, that's
at
what
the
I was
school
asking.
level.
Yes,
That-
the
that's
school
been
did, in that case, exactly what they should have done.
Yeah.
Okay,
It
that's
ended
what
up
I was
being-
Perfect. I
asking.
mean,
Yes.
I thought they did perfect.
I thought
Yes.
maybe everybody just had it and, okay.
Has
That's what
everybody
I was
mastered
asking.
it yet? I would
Yeah.
say no, we haven't gotten to that point yet, but
Yeah.
we're,
Is the video that you're referring to, there were like some high school age kids in it?
it was actually one young lady dressed
Yes,
5 different
yes.
ways.
Actually, I watched that entire thing. It was very, I mean, even for myself, I was like, oh, I'm gonna, finish watching this. And I would suggest that we send that to our parents, because especially for the younger kids, the parents could go over that with their kids, so
Yes.
they actually practice.
If I could add, we have added a Safe Schools tab to the county website. That video is under that Safe Schools tab, along with the reporting system for incidents, the state reporting system. There's a suicide prevention link right there. There is also another video that's probably better for like K2 students, for the younger grade level, that we're working on getting put on that platform also. So that's,
That would be my only suggestion, is that you make it available, and not just, the tab's a great idea, but
Right.
just to, and then reach out to them and let them know
I think what
that
we
it's
want to
there.
do certainly is to publicize the availability of these
Right.
resources and
Yeah.
encourage parents to visit
Practice
that.
at home.
right.
Homework.
And that video,
10%.
I feel like, as you watched it, in that 7 minutes, I think
It's
it's
very,
pretty clear and concise.
Exactly.
And very user-friendly on how to handle these protocols.
Mrs. Feathers, to kind of answer your previous question, I mean, again, Mr. Bettinger provided training to all of our administrators at the Administrative Academy with the expectation that there would be at least initial training. Certainly,
Right.
he's going to avail himself to any schools that require additional trainings
Right,
and so
right.
forth, and to try to coordinate not only with the school at large, but in particular, you know, I've asked for him to make specific emphasis with work with the school safety teams.
And I daily, almost daily, am in contact with one school or the other. This evening, I also met with a team prior to this meeting. And I have several meetings with other teams throughout the district upcoming. Like I said, it's an ongoing process. It's not something that we're gonna completely achieve overnight, but certainly do what we can to make everything as safe as possible.
And I know in sitting down, I just recently worked with Mr. Bittinger in regards to our evaluative goals. You know, I think one thing that he's, you know, really in advance of that, I mean, he was already doing many of the things that were kind of my expectations, which was good. One thing that I know he's really tried to do is to, you know, try to assess all of our sites and develop kind of a strategic, not necessarily a strategic plan, but basically a report of the potential vulnerabilities at that school. And then, you know, he's even gone as far as go through the process of looking at what are the needs here to address those vulnerabilities and kind of addressing those from a priority standpoint, red, yellow, green. You know, ones that we need to look at immediately, those that we can work on over time, and some of those are more long-term goals. And that's where we need to then work in conjunction. And I know, you know, Mike, you and I have had that conversation. We look at pursuing, for example, safety security grants and grant opportunities because there's certainly a lot of that money is out there. We kind of use that and also leverage our, you know, of course, the voters of Preston County have afforded us with the levy that has items related to safety and security. You know, we've done that in the past. We've used some of our levy monies, for example, the camera system, you know, the cameras that are here, and, you know, 108 plus cameras that have been installed were done with little to no, you know, major monies that were put out by the state because we were able to obtain monies elsewhere. So, you know, I know that's going to be a big goal, is to assess, you know, what we have fiscally to put towards projects, and then also try to go out there and seek, you know, outside monies to really stretch our dollars as much as possible. I know, Mike, the big priority we've looked at right now is the ability for our teachers to be able to quickly and efficiently secure interior doors. Because if we're looking at a keying solution, it's going to take too much time, too much money. You know, we need to look at a fire marshal approved device that we can easily train our staff, that we can easily, you know, ultimately install using local staffing. I mean, I know that's a huge priority for us.
In fact, I reached out to the fire marshal's office today regarding one of those particular systems. We do have in writing a letter from the fire marshal previously for a variance for one particular school. It did not cover the entire district, so I'm trying to get that to where we would be able to utilize that similar system. And I can provide information on that stuff, what that specifically is, but it's much easier than trying to change entire key systems for buildings that would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars.
We got to be smart with this and use your money
Right.
well.
So where we can actually secure doors in a timely manner without changing all those systems.
Have you been able to meet with the sheriff's department, and are we making steps forward on their additional access requests?
Yes, they've been taken care of.
They have all, that's completely done.
The sheriff's office particularly has key access or card access to every school.
Okay.
I'm still working with the state police to get that done, but yes,
And the cards are available.
and
We
the
just
cards
need
are available. I'm just working through the process. I had to
Access
get
to-
an MOU written, so there's some understanding about what cards are to be used for and not used for and things like that.
Access to our security footage?
They do not have that yet,
All right, that's being.
other than our SRO.
Right,
He
right.
would have access.
Right.
I think in order for them to get, if I'm understanding you correctly, it's a much bigger project to get them the access for all the security systems.
I think
all
that's
the
where we're going to
camera
have to work in
systems.
conjunction with Mr.
We've talked
Sines.
about that to where it's all integrated, to where it can be viewed.
Okay, so that one's in process, that's fine.
That is probably going to take a little while. till we get to that point. But we've identified that as a need.
Right.
And we're getting to that point. But as far as the cards and the access to the buildings, it's done.
Okay. And part of the implementation into each one of the schools, there are community contacts that have been made outside the school, contact lists and things of that nature, I believe. Will those people who have been asked to serve in those roles in our communities be getting some kind of a letter from you explaining the full idea of those, of your goals and the process if they were to ever be put into use? And maybe this is not part of something that you're implementing.
There's been people identified in their security plans that may be from outside the.
Okay.
The head of those crisis teams, I believe, is working with them. I have met with a handful of those crisis teams working to build their plans and I haven't specifically met with those people from outside the outside the school system, and I'm sure they exist. I have worked with those teams to ensure that MOUs are done with some of these buildings that we would need to utilize in case of an evacuation or an emergency at one of the schools, to where they have something in writing, a procedure in place, access to that building. It's one thing to say, yeah, we can move our students to this building, but if we don't have access to it, it's no good.
Right.
So I've tried to encourage the administrators and the leaders of these crisis teams to actually, some of them had MOUs, some of them didn't. We're trying to update the ones that were in place and put ones in place that were not currently in place. It was just try to put something in writing rather than a handshake or just a verbal agreement, to where there's something solid on paper.
Okay, I just understood that there was, at least in some schools, there was an outside emergency contact, things of that nature that were being put in place, and I didn't know if we were going to send out something that said, you know, people obviously in their, most people in the community just, yeah, we'll do that. But something officially that tells them, hey, here's what to expect, or here's what will actually be utilized with you in this position, things of that nature. And again, this may not be something you implemented. I just heard it was some things that were going out from.
I'm not exactly sure what you're referring to, but it's
Okay,
not something that I've currently been working on.
okay. Maybe it's part of a different program then. That's fine. Thank you.
Okay.
Anything else? Anybody? Thank you.
Thank you.
Sounds like you've done a great deal.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on the signups, Mr. McCrum, are you speaking or just signing? Okay, now there's another name on here I cannot read, and I apologize. It was the fifth one that's apparent. I honestly have not, is there anybody that signed up I have not called on except for Mrs. Jenkins yet? Okay, just leave it alone. Okay, last but not least, Mrs. Rhonda Jenkins.
Good evening, board members. At this point, I probably should have brought my tap shoes to wake everybody up. There's just one problem, well, actually two problems. I don't have tap shoes and I can't tap dance. But at least it would wake everyone up. I need to address Mastery Learning briefly. I have used Mastery Learning. I used it when I taught reading. For those of you who don't know my background, and there are only a couple of you who don't, I taught for 39 years in the classroom and mentored beginning teachers before, during, and after that time. I have taught grades K through 12, and I've also worked with adults. I mentored beginning teachers for many years, and I also trained mentors throughout West Virginia. So I have been in classrooms at all levels, and observed some excellent teaching in this county. I worked with a remedial reading program for ninth graders for several years and actually used Mastery Learning. So I know exactly what it is, unless it's changed in the last year or two. Mastery Learning works with each individual student to reach mastery rather than to do a blanket instruction for an entire group. But I should say that when I was doing this mastery learning, the classroom size was limited to 20 kids, and I had a collaborator who was trained, whom I trained, to work with me to help the kids master their skills. And it was wonderfully successful. There was an average of 2.5 to 3 grade levels improvement in a year doing that. I also had a 90-minute class period for a whole year instead of just a semester. I believe that mastery learning does work. I believe we're limited somewhat in trying to implement that when classes are 29 or 30 people. And it's a year-long class rather than a semester, and our class sizes are too large. And we need to remember a kid like, I'll use the name Aloysius, who comes in reading 3 years below grade level. And I tell his grandma and Aloysius at the freshman orientation meeting that I've never in my career failed a kid who tried. So if he will give me 100% every day, he's going to be okay. A 90-10 grading policy would make a liar out of me. Because here's this kid, he's scoring 30% on his tests. It's all he's got. And I work with him diligently. And by the end of the semester, he's in the 45 to 50% range on his tests, but he's working hard every single day. By the end of the year, he's in the 60th percentile on his tests. He's making improvement. His reading level has come up 1.5 years. He's making good progress, and he's giving me the best he can every day. Does that child deserve to fail? No. But I guarantee you that if I can't use these daily assignments to boost his grade, he's not going to do the daily assignments next year because it didn't help him. We have to hold kids accountable for that daily work, or they will not do it. And that daily work is what we use to build the skills so that the child can achieve mastery. Now, should there be a discussion about how we score our activities in class and how much formative assessment should be weighed and how much summative assessment should be weighed? Yes, that's an important discussion to have. And I think the best place to have that is in a department meeting where the teachers know their content, they know the skills they're trying to achieve, and they know their kids. I don't think a blanket policy will get us where we want to go. I believe that teacher autonomy cannot be lost in this process. I believe that teaching is creative and intuitive. It is not prescriptive and directive. Neither is training teachers. Neither is administering teachers prescriptive and directive. You will not get the results you want when you do that because teachers will give up. Students will be bored. If we want to get the results that we need, that we all hope for, in my personal opinion, go ahead.
1 minute. It's just 1 minute more.
Okay, provide the teachers with the resources that they need, give them a variety of instructional strategies, give them technology that actually works, and a copier, and books, and pencils, and paper, and everything else that they could possibly need. Back them up when they need support. And please don't try to micromanage the classroom. You defeat the creativity when you do that. And it's not going to be the best thing for kids. Thank you for listening.
Can I ask one question?
Yes, sir, you can.
First of all, thank you for speaking to us. When you just mentioned give teachers a variety of instructional strategies, would 90-10 be considered an instructional strategy in your mind?
No, that's a grading policy.
Okay, so what would be?
That's different. I'm just saying that with this grading policy, it gives me the feeling that we're micromanaging the classroom, and we don't want to do that with grading, and we don't want to do that with instruction, because teachers need to have some autonomy. We all went to school. You know, we studied hard. We learned all different kinds of instructional strategies and grading policies, and we know best what works best with our kids. And if big decisions and big changes need to be made, teachers need to be involved in those decisions, including the grading policy. Anyone else have a question for me?
No, thank you as always, because I talked with you a lot of those 39 years.
Yes, indeed you did. Did you
So-
recognize Aloysius? I'll bet you did. I bet you did too. It wasn't any particular child, but an example of many children we have seen. Thank you again.
Thank you,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Jenkins.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to the agenda. Entertain a motion to recommend the board approve the meeting agenda.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Feathers, second by Mr. Tatham. Call for the vote. Oh, I'm sorry, any discussion? Call for the vote.
Voting's open. Oh, shoot, I thought it was. Sorry, now it is. Voting's now open. Motion passes 5-0.
Okay, moving on, minutes from the 8/22/22 meeting. Entertain a motion to recommend the board approve the meeting minutes from 8/22/22.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Zigray, seconded by Mr. Tatham. Any questions or corrections of the minutes? Hearing none, call for the vote.
Voting's open. Motion passes 5-0.
Next on the agenda, superintendent's report.
Okay, board members, you received like a packet in a manila folder at the onset of the meeting. I did avail you with the superintendent's update that was emailed out this morning. Just very quickly, you can review the weekly schedule. We have several training sessions scheduled this week. Also, we have planned to complete our SIPA requirement lessons for students in grades K through 8. SIPA, of course, refers to the Children's Internet SIPA Protection Act. Too long a day. That is basically a requirement for any district receiving federal E-rate funds. We do have to provide specific cyber safety training to our students. It then must be documented. That's one condition of the receipt of any E-rate funds. A few other things included. I did want to let you all know that within our pack, well, we'll talk about it in a moment, but we are going to be able to be getting out a request form for students and staff who are interested in obtaining an internet hotspot. Last week, we did receive approval for approximately $240,000 from the Emergency Connectivity Fund related to the provision of internet hotspots for students and staff in need. In addition, it will also allow us to get a partial reimbursement for the laptop devices that were purchased, the 760-odd laptops that were purchased earlier this year. Depending upon the students that are issued to, we have to get information from those students, but we would be able to receive a partial reimbursement. I think this past year we were able to pull in approximately $85,000 that were recouped through this process. I would anticipate probably that valuation will be a little bit higher this year based upon the cost of the devices went up during the course of the year. One thing that is announced, Preston County Schools, there was an announcement made today. We will be dismissing all district schools 2 hours early on Thursday, September 29th, which is Buckwheat Thursday. This will be communicated to all students and parents using Apogee. It has not gone out yet, but that will be forthcoming. I want to make sure that teachers and staff are made aware. A few things, number one, this has been a ongoing issue. There's always been debate in terms of an early dismissal as it relates specifically to Kingwood Elementary. It's a very challenging week for them with being in close proximity to the Buckwheat grounds. Also, as Mr. Bittinger referred to earlier, we do have a pretty substantial requirement of our staff for the online review of code-based policies related to assorted topics, whether it is, for example, mandated reporting requirements or SIPA requirements. There are There's approximately 6.5 hours of footage that have been required. Those were originally posted in mid-August. We've set an artificial deadline of October 3rd. And again, we're trying to avail, that's a portion of this too, is we're certainly trying to avail some time for our teachers and staff to get that done. Service personnel must be afforded time during the course of the workday for completion of work of this nature. As you go through the packet, again, there's a curriculum update and cyber safety lessons and web light. This was all afforded to our teaching staff, and then a number of updates that came from the State Department. You've had a chance to review those earlier as you were included on that correspondence as you are weekly. You know, again, the exact amount for our well, actually, I want to jump to the maintenance section. A quick update on maintenance. The tear out and Aurora paving projects have been completed. However, Mr. Murray did need to confirm on the lining and striping. He anticipated that was done Friday, it was done this past Saturday. The one thing that has not been done is the final walkthrough. I know, Mr. Kisner, you had a question to this effect. A representative from Thrasher Engineering, along with Mr. Murray or a designee from Preston County Schools, will certainly do a walkthrough to assess any issues that need to be addressed before closing the project out fully. The vocational school HVAC repair, Mr. Murray indicated that repair has been made. There are some vocational teachers in there. Mrs. Hirschman, the AC in your room at this point, has that issue been resolved? I know earlier in the year it was down.
My room always stays the same, but I know Miss Carlisle across the hall from me, I think her room is better and the school is better.
Okay. Yeah, they had, that was what we talked to the board earlier in terms of, there was a lightning strike, they had to order in parts, but from my understanding, that has now been repaired. Many split units at the Brewston School, and particularly in the middle school section. The project is in process. They hope to be able to wrap that installation up this week. There's a dead tree, Mr. Kisner, that you reported. And speaking with Mr. Murray, his intent is that should be able to be handled by county maintenance staff. We may need to follow up with the tree service because we're unable to do stump grinding and so forth. They'll be able to get it down, and then we may need to assess the stump in the aftermath. We do have submitted bids for, we are asking for, there's been advertisements for bids submission in regards to that are due on 9/14 related to the engineering firm selection for the major improvement project at the PHS Secure Entryway project. We also are seeking bids for the demolition and removal of the bleachers from the old West Preston field. I actually had a very good conversation with the mayor of Masontown today. I know that was one thing that was requested at the last meeting. I think, and Mr. Tatham, I know one thing is, a discussion we had is, possibly scheduling some time to discuss the long-term potential use of the property, as you had kind of alluded to at a previous meeting. We've also seeking bids on 9/15 for the ceiling and line striping at Central Preston, South Preston, and West Preston schools. Board members, you look down through the maintenance, an update with the maintenance database has been afforded to you in a later portion of the agenda. Technology update, again, district teachers and K-8 are doing the cyber safety lessons. Preston County Schools has been awarded $240,972 for offset and partial reimbursement for laptops. I do want to throw out and commend our technology staff, Paul Sines, Alan Corbett, Brian Moats, David Card, Chad Barker, and Mrs. Darla Moyers, along with district teachers Jenny Zinn, Rebecca Stump, Michelle Liga, and Sophia Titchener for their efforts in preparing and delivering thousands of student laptops and iPads within the first few weeks of school. There was a lot of hard work put on by those folks, and really, I've been involved in that process for many years, and I really greatly appreciate it. Becky, I know you've done some of that too. It's a lot of hard work, and I really appreciate how quickly they were trying to accomplish that task. The laptops, actually, I know from the point of delivery in terms of, it was approximately a week that they received 760 laptops, and were able to get those out into kids' hands within the week. I also want to thank Gail Bomar and Dawn Titchener in our maintenance department who assisted with getting a lot of those delivered out to the school sites. Those guys were very helpful, I know, to Mrs. Moyers. Did want to congratulate 9 students who were recognized for the Order of the Rhododendron. I actually included I had placed a Facebook ad on our website, or on our Facebook site, just updating. They identified, I believe, the top 10, or it may have been top 9 this year, overall scores on last year's Golden Horseshoe. I just really applaud the McGrew Society. I've been part of that as I was a West Virginia Studies teacher. That group just goes out, certainly goes well above and beyond in seeking to recognize our students and our teachers. Really appreciate, I know Clear Mountain Bank has also worked in conjunction with the McGrew Society to supply, I believe the kids got gift cards associated with their accomplishment as well. They get to ride in the Buckwheat Festival Parade. I've honestly told the ladies with the McGrew Society, I don't know of any other county that does anything to recognize the students to the point that those folks do. So it's greatly appreciated what they do each year. Last Friday, I attended a scheduled meeting for all state superintendents in Charleston. I know the board was also in receiving training on Friday and Saturday of that week. During the meeting, we were addressed by new West Virginia State Board President Paul Hardesty and new West Virginia State Superintendent David Roach. President Hardesty emphasized, and I'm sure you guys heard, a back-to-basics approach advocating for greater emphasis on reading, language arts, writing, and math. He hopes to lighten many of the mandates that have been placed on teachers, but with the expectation to see improved results. That was the take I took from Mr. Hardesty. Superintendent Roach reiterated the importance of curricular focus. He hopes to reinstitute. One thing I thought was good that I haven't heard in a while, wants to reinstitute the Summer Principals Academy, although I would say our district, I appreciate the work that's done by Mrs. Layton and Mrs. Berry in terms of planning and organizing an annual Principals Academy. I mean, this is something the states want to do, and I talk to colleagues down there. We're one of the very few districts that really does that type of thing that focuses on instructional leadership. So I appreciate the work of our curriculum staff and other members of the central office staff to help to try to organize that each year. It's really, I think, a good thing, and I think the state can see the value in it as well when they're trying to institute that. He closed his statements with updates on his take on the potential constitutional amendments 2 and 4. I would say I provided you with information related to 2 and 4 that was availed to me from the WVASA and their legal counsel. The only thing I would say is that the message I received at this meeting was very much at odds with what we had received previously. And Superintendent Roach has tried to schedule a time for superintendents and for myself and Mrs. Kerstetter and our other colleagues of that ilk in other counties to try to be availed with the information that they're wanting to provide. It's very tough to navigate this because, again, you're being told one thing and then you're being told something else in terms of the potential impact that particularly that Amendment 2 could have from a fiscal standpoint on our district. It's worrisome. I know there were a lot of questions that popped up during the course of that meeting. So, Amendment 4, he indicated, one thing that Mr. Roach said is that this amendment would require legislative approval for state board policy updates and changes. He indicated he did not have significant concerns with this and the fact that he's worked under the direction with his work with the SBA, has worked under legislative oversight. He didn't express a major issue or concern with that particular amendment. The meeting concluded with updates on the general summative assessment data, also K-8 priority standards, revisions to the Every Student Success Act plan, and finally, the provision of balanced scorecard results. The current updated West Virginia balanced scorecard, Angie, am I correct, it is still reflecting last year's data? So even though they've provided us data, the one thing I can let the board know, and I have not had the discussions with the schools at this point, but we had 2 schools that appeared on that list. Because I have not personally spoken with those administrators yet, I would prefer, it's included in your package, but we do have 2 schools that were placed on the targeted support school list, one for having a subgroup in the red category for 3 consecutive years, and one for having a subgroup that was in the red category in all areas. The issue seems to be in that these schools were impacted because they are larger enrollment schools and are typically more impacted because they have more subgroups. Some of our smaller schools don't have these subgroups, but in both instances, it is the special needs students category that was what impacted these schools and have placed them on that. What our team will then do from a curricular standpoint, we will get together and try to develop a plan to best support these schools. Obviously, the one school is potentially can be placed on the comprehensive list next year unless we can make some positive change. So that's going to be, obviously what we're tasked with and moving forward. At this point, that's all I have for my update. Oh, okay, in addition, yes, you're correct, Mr. Smith. I'm sorry. In addition, I've also included my annual goals for the board's review. If you go into the section, it has been included. I've already received some feedback, and there was the initial submission, and then there's been a revised submission. In taking in that feedback, I know some board members have indicated, they had some additional suggestions, which at this point, those can certainly be submitted to me by email. I will continue to send dialogue back and forth until we can come collectively to a agreeable list of goals that can then be formally approved at our next meeting. But I think we do need to press here that we need to get these approved within the prescribed timelines of September 15th. So I guess I'm asking for permission from the board, if that would be agreeable, that we can, kind of continue to assess these goals to determine what is, the collective will of the board in regards to the goals for my employment this year.
So are we going to need a special meeting to approve those?
When I asked Mr. Martin that earlier, I may be interjecting instead of you, so if I'm wrong, go ahead. I asked him that question. He thinks as long as we can do them and we have them by the 15th and then approve them at the next board meeting, we would meet those guidelines,
Okay.
right?
And what I would do is keep all written documentation of any correspondence with the members in terms of trying to determine what we feel is, we're kind of in the draft portion at this point to determine what the board collectively wants to see for those goals. I think if we can come to an amicable agreement, and really, there's some things that are prescribed there. There's certain, there has to be an academic goal, but really the other goals that are listed relate to communication, safety, security, and discipline. So those are all things that, again, that are appropriate goals stated. But if there is specific requests that any board member wants to see, I would simply ask to review those and make any, suggestions that you would like to see in regards to my goals.
But we're saying that by the 15th, they will be finalized but not officially passed in a meeting, is that correct?
And through the meeting minutes, Mr. Kisner, I think we can address that there was an agreed upon list of goals that were formally approved at the September 26th. One thing I can check, Mr. Huggins, is if there's any need beyond that, but my understanding that would be sufficient in this instance.
Okay. Are you good with that? Okay, moving on
No,
next.
I got some questions.
Okay.
Seniority list, have we done away with that, or are we?
The service seniority list was published on September 1st as prescribed by code.
Okay,
It was sent digitally to all schools. It was also a paper copy was afforded all schools and provided at the last principals meeting.
All right, what about a teacher's seniority list?
Teacher seniority list is not required in code, correct, Mrs. Varner? However, we do maintain a seniority list. But it's not required for public service. Service is required by September 1st and January 1st.
Okay. All right. Just wanted to bring up, so some of the administrators know why we're asking so many questions. At our last board meeting, we are going to get a report card based on a number of outcomes, and one of the big ones they stressed was student outcome, academic performance, and improvement and achievement in your schools. So if we're asking a lot of questions and we're having a lot of meetings that we didn't have in the past, it's because it's required, and they are grading the board. Thank you.
Okay.
There's one thing on that there, Mr. Ziegler, because I don't have mine in front of me. What's the
Correct.
one about the parents? We need to make sure there's a policy, it's like number 4.
That involves the community, businesses, parents. It's the
Would you
last-
give that to Mr. Martin? Because I
I think
could
Mr.
not-
Martin must be aware of it, because I think his 5th goal actually addressed it, if I recall.
It does indirectly. I just
Okay.
got to make sure that we are covering that. Because that was one I couldn't find.
Yeah, they just gave it to us.
I couldn't find it. I'm not saying it's not there, because there's 900 and some pages.
Which I would believe that based on the way that was written in there, we have the whole fiscal school year in
Correct.
order to,
Correct,
in
but-
order to pass policy and start implementation.
Correct. And I just want to make sure so we don't drag our feet.
Yeah.
And then we get written up.
I'm a procrastinator. We're going to wait till the last month.
No, you are. Okay. moving.
Mr. Huggins, I'm
yeah.
just going to get a copy
Yeah.
get a copy from Mr. Ziegler at the conclusion of the meeting.
Okay.
Address that.
Okay, moving on, service personnel. Entertain a motion for the board to recommend and approve the service personnel agenda.
So move.
Second.
Okay, moved by Mr. Tatham, second by Ms. Feather. Any questions or comments? Hearing none, call for the vote.
Voting's open. Motion passes 5-0.
Moving on, professional personnel. We entertain a motion to recommend the board approve the professional agenda.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Feather, second by Mr. Ziegler. Questions or concerns?
I have a couple questions. We're looking for 2 math teachers, and when I asked this question earlier, we said we had everybody certified except for 1 at Preston High, right? So I assume somebody's taking this open position right now on a long-term sub basis? Okay, so the other one, we have an uncertified person? What do they have to be teaching? Do you happen to know? The uncertified person's teaching? Geometry. Okay. All right. Okay, another question on the History Bowl. Is that are we providing transportation to whatever school that particular teacher's at?
Mrs. Layton, in terms of History Bowl, I know that last year the sponsor was Mrs. Gank. And you're asking about transportation, Mr. Ziegler?
Right, like if somebody from another school wanted to get involved with the History Bowl, is that just a local school thing, or is that?
And Miss,
We had one kid in the school wanting to participate, and only another school was having a team. We had several teachers that were working with Mrs. Gank, and then at the last minute, a couple of them couldn't do it. But I think pretty much every school had somebody interested in it.
Okay.
and Mrs. Layton, I know they brought them in here. I remember they did I think it was a practice session here at the board in which they bussed them in here in day.
Good, I just want to know if it was countywide. Good.
Any other questions?
Any other questions? Yes, okay, call for the vote.
Voting's open. Motion passes 5-0.
Okay, next is to, I lost my place here, hold on a second. Out-of-state field trips. I'll entertain a motion for the board to recommend and approve the submitted out-of-state field trips.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Okay, it's been properly moved in second. Questions or comments? I've got a question as far as procedural. Am I supposed to read each of these since it's on the agenda? Or am I okay just?
Read them. I think just you're reading about the submitted trips. I mean, if you want them inclusive of, they're listed in the content section.
Okay, and then my only question again is, we have a situation where Preston High School is going to Northern. If they would be going to Huntington, West Virginia, we wouldn't be having this. Are we anywhere in process of getting that out of state?
No, we need to get on that, I know, because I know that's been running down.
I mean, because
It would
it's,
save, it would save me a lot of work, honestly, because I don't end up having to submit.
and it's.
Because a lot of times those are the trips that pop up because they so frequently go to Garrett County. or
And
surrounding
this one in
counties.
particular, the JROTC didn't know to get it in time. So, I mean, that's why it's to that date. I want to make sure the board knows that. But that's just something to make sure we do need to get that done because it's kind of, we're 30 minutes. And if you're
Well,
out of
theirs,
the
theirs
roar,
was
you're on-
different. They didn't have a traditional form because they're utilizing another busing vendor, not.
Right, because we didn't
Houston
have
County
one.
Bus. Correct.
Yeah, what is the details on that?
They're utilizing Buckwheat Express service, which Buckwheat Express does have the requisite insurance policies. We've used them in the past in instances where we could not avail them with transportation from our own county.
Yeah, I more mean, what is since a bus was not available? Like, is that just lack of bus drivers because of school day?
Depending
or-
upon I'd have to look, was it a Saturday? I'm not looking at the date of the event, I'm not sure. 9/26, what is that?
It's probably, that's Friday night, isn't it?
26 is a Monday?
Monday?
26 was a Monday, depending upon the time, and it may have been contributed to, Mr. Kisner. Sometimes it's the time that they need to be on site at Northern. Our buses wouldn't have the opportunity to make their afternoon runs and still get them there on time. I'm going to venture to say that's probably the circumstance, but without Mr. Plum here, I couldn't tell you that definitively.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Call for the vote?
Voting's open. Motion passes 5-0.
Moving on to the off-site event requests. Entertain a motion to recommend the board approve the Preston School cross-country team to host its annual in-county meet on September 20th, 22, at the Paula Young Farm in Brewston Mills, West Virginia.
And Mr. Huggins, I would say this has been, they've conducted activities at this venue on multiple occasions. The reason that there's an annual request is, again, if it appears on our board agenda, it avails the homeowners some coverage in regards to liability. And I went through a similar process when I first started cross-country. We were using private property and had to request permission from the board.
Thank you for that clarification. So moved.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Kisner, second by Mr. Zigray. Any other questions or comments? Call for the vote.
Voting's open. Motion passes 5-0.
Moving on, educational leave. Entertain a motion to recommend the board approve the attached educational leave request.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Zigray, second by Ms. Feathers. Questions or comments? Hearing none, call for the vote.
Voting's open. One, two, Jeff?
Yeah, it just came.
Motion passes 5-0.
Moving on, the Little Bear MOU. At this time, I entertain a motion to recommend the board approve the MOU between Preston County Schools and the Little Bear Child Care Center LLC.
Mr. Huggins, I just wanted to clarify one thing. Mrs. Varner, you may be able to assist with this. The amount of money that was referenced there, I mean, we are able to count the Little Bear students if they meet the requisite age. We're able to account those as within our student count. So and Mr. Kisner, I know you would have a question about that. So any students that are availed in that process, we're able to be compensated to offset those costs. Correct.
That cost is fully reimbursed? And is that a
We need-
big?
Wait a minute, wait. We We need to do it, we have to do the questions. So I need a motion first.
So move.
Second.
Okay, moved by Mr. Tatham, second by Mr. Zigray.
Sorry about
Now,
that, guys.
questions and
Fire
comments.
away.
Mr. Kisner, I think you were starting when I stopped you.
I was just asking, is that done through a bid, or how did that arrangement come into play?
Business partner within our pre-K collaborative agreements. And Little Bear is our collaborative agreement partner. So therefore, we have to work with them and have an MOU in order to be within state agreements. So, they teach their 4-year-olds, but they are enrolled within our enrollment group. So therefore, we get to count them because they are our business partner. So they're on our count as full-time FTE students.
But could anybody else in the Brewston area do that? Right, I think this was in the Brewston area?
It is in the Brewster.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mrs. Vaughn, I'm not certain of the bidding requirements. I mean, we could inquire with Mrs. Miller, who's not present tonight, as to what procedurally, how that's done. I'm not sure if that's an annual, if that has to be put out for annual bid, or how that's accomplished.
Other schools just have pre-K programs. In this area, we partner with them to do that, such as what we were talking about with Rollsburg would be moved up to Preston, or to Kingwood.
We have collaborative work, for example, with Head Start, where in Head Start, in some instances, they may afford us teachers and/or aides in some sites. But Little Bear is an instance where, again, it's a private business. And really, there's not a ton of alternatives for us in Preston County, but I mean, there are potentially others. But honestly, I am not aware specifically of the bid process, but we can find out.
Okay, no problem. Thank you.
Is this a renewed memorandum of understanding, or is this a new one?
This is renewal. Yeah, this is one every year.
Same one. Gotcha. Do we have, do we oversee as far as their eligibility, their enrollment numbers, pretty much the metropolitan policy?
There's a collaborative pre-K group that meets every month, and they come and they're part of it, and
Do they accept anybody? So no matter what, they would accept students from Preston County
Up
in
to
the Brewston
16.
area.
Up to 16. Up to 16 total students, sorry.
I got you.
but they also have 3 years and under also. I mean, it's a daycare center.
Mrs. Varner, is that, so like, when you say 16, do they have to hold 4 spots for prospective 3-year-olds? Is that, because typically the pre-K threshold is 20, right?
We also have a 3-year-old program,
Gotcha, okay,
but they can only do 16 in a 4-year-old program.
okay.
And they follow the same guidelines and everything that our pre-Ks have to follow. They have to do all the same rules and curriculum and everything that our pre-K programs do.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Call for the vote.
Voting's open. Motion passes 5-0.
Next is just line item for discussion, student board member process.
Mr. Huggins, I placed this on the agenda. I'm actively working on the application, but I did have a few questions, and I know I need to confer with Mr. Seymour and PHS in regards to what we're looking for there. The one question I have is I did have a concern before we proceed with this. We're traveling to, I think, 8 different venues during the course of the year. And previously, when we've had this in place, there was consistent meetings here at the board offices, so that, I guess that's one thing I'm concerned with.
No, we traveled. And they
Was
traveled
that a
with
travel,
us.
was that a travel? I couldn't remember them.
Yep.
So I guess my only question is, is this board still comfortable with that process where the students would travel before we would proceed with that? I mean, I'm going to work to finalize the application process and would like to get that out very soon.
I know nothing of the subject matter at hand.
We had students sitting up here with us.
They can participate, they cannot go in executive session, they do not have a vote. So the student would be here basically kind of to represent Preston High's views and students' views.
They participate in discussion.
Yes.
And I think we actually let them entertain a vote, although it wasn't, an official. But as a board member, I feel it was a very good perspective from the students.
I agree. They were excellent
Very
students.
intelligent and very well-spoken for their peers, and it sometimes gave, a new perspective on things and inside source. So I just think it's real important for.
And you generally had one?
We had two
Two?
that year. Which is, because they weren't always able to be here at the same time, so it was good to have them.
And I take it based on Mr. Martin's statement about applications, it was selected by,
I don't recall how they did it, if it was. So they fill out an application of interest, and then the admin team will select from that.
Yeah, the one thing in trying to write it, I've tried to review some other states. Go ahead, Brenda, I'm sorry.
It worked out well.
And I think when we started to put that out there, they were the two that expressed interest, they were both really great
Yeah.
candidates, and so we just said, do you want them both?
Yeah, that worked out well, though.
But within the application, I'm also trying to indicate like some of the requirements, the expectation be they traveled all meetings within reason. I mean, there
Yeah.
may be situations where they couldn't attend a specific, but just some of the guidelines and expectations for them as they fill that out. But I just wanted to be sure before we finalize this, that this is still something the board was wanting to entertain just through an informal discussion here.
Yes,
If no one's adverse to that, then we would certainly proceed.
yes, but I'd like to add one item. I think that especially hearing from 3 faculty members earlier today, I think I would like to see the faculty senate be involved in selecting the students. I think that'll give us a broader representation.
Okay, it'll be my intent to try to get this out as quickly as possible for review from the administrative team and faculty senate representation, so that we can get some potential applicants for it. And hopefully we'll get 2 more good ones, or at least 1 good one, or, I don't know what the interest level will be, but we'll certainly publicize that and try to get some students interested and involved, because I agree, I think it was the kids who were involved in that, I think, did an outstanding job, and I think it was a good process for them. I would indicate too, from a professional resume standpoint, it's a good, something good for the kids to be involved with and that can demonstrate that, as they move forward.
Okay, moving on, I'm sorry, was that all? Okay, moving on, another discussion, concerns with screen time.
I requested that to be put on the budget, and I'd like to request for it to be tabled for this meeting, unless someone else wants to speak.
I'd actually assumed this was on the agenda from the last meeting when I had put it on there, and Mr. Martin was going to bring back and find out what we had in ability to know metrics and times on screens and things of that nature. So I don't know which way it got
So I'll
on there.
withdraw my table.
Well, no, what I would say is, Mr. Tatham did request it to be on. Mr. Kisner, at this point, I do not, unfortunately, I do not have any new information. I'm certainly willing to put this on future agendas. I just,
Completely acceptable.
at this juncture, I did not have anything prepared for that item tonight.
And it's not a voting item, so we can keep going. Okay, next is PHS grading practices. And I'm going to start, I think, with you, Mr. Martin, because there's nothing there.
Okay. Obviously, we've heard from delegation groups tonight. I would like an opportunity, we've heard from the delegation, I would like for an opportunity for Mr. Seymour to be able to address the board. Before doing so, Mr. Seymour, if it's agreeable to you, do you mind if I address the issue as well? Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. Let me get through my notes here. So from the concern, as we assess the issue or look at it historically, I'm going to try to be as quick as I can with this. I know it's been a long night, but this issue originally came to the forefront in October of 2020. There was a proposal for mastery learning concepts that involved, what I think would have been some pretty significant changes to the grading scale at that point in time. The board at that time felt that from a procedural standpoint, there were some things that had not been done, and that at this point, the school was not ready for what was being, proposed at that point in time. Through this process, that's kind of more so where it originated. I know that Mr. Watering followed up with a presentation to Mastery Learning Concepts with the idea that district level administrators and county staff would be afforded with training opportunities to work with experts in the field as it pertained to grading policies. Hence, that was during the course of last year, Mr. Seymour and other administrators, myself and other district level staff were afforded with the opportunity to receive training from resident experts Myron Durrick and, I always forget the other guy's name, Ken O'Connor. Thank you. And really, this was what I would call an embedded professional development activity where we were immersed, in that discussion throughout the course of the year. Really, through that process, the team of people that were together through that time came up with a consensus statement that's been shared with the board through, at various junctures. It's shared on this agenda. It's been shared in some of our work sessions earlier with kind of the conceptual guidelines that team of people felt were appropriate as it pertained to grading practices. Where I feel like at that junction, that was probably, Ms. Varner, probably mid last year. So at that juncture, I'll be perfectly honest with you, I don't know that and I'll take this on, again, as someone who was ultimately named to be the superintendent of schools, I don't know the timeline of that even, it was probably March, April. As I said earlier, I feel like that I should have had a better pulse in terms of, what our schools were seeking to enact. I think what and I don't want to speak for Mr. Seymour, but I think Mr. Seymour's intent in this instance is he was trying to proceed with I won't say a directive, but something that our district administrative team had been immersed in for almost an entirety of a year, felt that our experts were indicating that this was good practice and that this was in the best interest of students and staff at Preston High School. Where, as you related to policy, because there were a number of questions related to was this initiative sought with proper policy from a policy standpoint, was it pursued in the appropriate manner, I guess would be the verbiage I would use. That's where, again, Mr. Seymour and I have had conversations and we've looked at existing policy. The one thing I would say is probably the proper course for this is reference to policy 3-10, which relates to the curriculum committee process, in which a committee would be formed encompassing administration, counseling staff, and at least 3 staff representatives that are teaching at least three grade levels in the school. That committee could then be tasked to assess, whether it's grading policy change, curricular change in the school that they are seeking, work through that process, and potentially bring a motion or a proposal to the board for approval or disapproval. I think as a part of that committee, it would be very important to encompass staff that are both in favor of the measure and against the measure, so that you can potentially, if this is something that committee ultimately decides that they would pursue, that they're afforded the opportunity to work through a lot of the issues that, for example, Mrs. Hirschman or Mrs. Robb felt that were potential issues. I think there are potential issues. I think there's potential issues in anything we do. I think there are potential issues in our current practices. Our current practices in some situations, and I don't want to throw a blanket statement over all staff. I think there are problems with the manner in which some teaching staff in terms of their grading practices are not necessarily reflective of what the student actually knows and are not reflective of their mastery of particular content. And again, I think that was probably the mindset. And again, Todd, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I don't think anything was done with bad intent here, guys. I don't. There wasn't on my part, and I certainly don't think so with Mr. Seymour either. What I think is maybe, this policy really kind of gives you the natural progression of what probably ultimately needs to happen here, is that we need, involvement of the staff, the entirety of the teaching staff. It affords us time for training opportunities for the staff, for the board, and depending upon if this is, the path that the school would choose to pursue, I think this gives us a clear picture. If there are other schools that are wanting to go this route, it gives us kind of the proper sequence and steps to do so. So I think in this instance, I applaud PHS for kind of leading the way in terms of if they feel, I'm going to say this. I've heard a lot during our work sessions about that our academic performance is not where it needs to be. If that is the case, then we cannot continue to proceed to do the same things over and over and over again. We have to be open to at least the idea of making some changes that are necessary. And I don't think there's anyone at PHS that is unwilling to make changes. And I'm not saying this change is right, wrong, or indifferent, but conceptually there are aspects of what was put forth there that I do agree with, because I sat in that same room with Mr. Seymour and other county administrators, and I didn't cast disagreement with it. So, I just want to say I'll take ownership in aspects of what's occurred here. So Mr. Seymour, that's where I am with this, but I'd like to avail you an opportunity to speak to the board in terms of whatever you'd like to say in regards to the 90-10 proposal.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'll make this brief. I'm tired. I was just trying to do what I thought I was supposed to do. We spent an entire, basically 2 years, as an academic coach working on mastery learning. And then we had these experts from Canada come in and spend an entire year with us, multiple hours of work that we spent, and we came up with the document. And straight up honest with you, I just did what another school had already done. One of our schools had already put this policy in place. Okay? So I thought, yeah, that's a good idea. What my mistake was, I didn't follow proper procedure. I'll just be straight up honest with you. I didn't bring it to committee. By the way, at the high school, we no longer have committees, we have action teams. Because to me, committees get bogged down. This is just totally aside, this has nothing to do with this. So I told our staff that we are gonna have action teams, because I expect that when we go into a committee meeting, we have some kind of result. So I didn't bring it to the curriculum committee. That was my mistake. I've talked with Mr. Martin and some others, and I think another problem we had was when we got done with Ken and Myron, we did not have a plan of action. We never really had direction on what we should do with this. So I just thought, okay, let's go ahead with it. They honestly want to do 100% summative. That's it. They don't want to do any formative. You don't grade homework, you don't grade quizzes, you don't grade any of that stuff. I'm not saying I agree with that. They say you should have no deadlines. I'm not saying I agree with that. Okay? How many of you have a job where you have deadlines? Right? So I'm not saying I agreed with everything they said, and I don't think as the administrators, as we created that document, that we necessarily agreed with everything they said. So my intention was not to tick these people off. My intention is not to micromanage. They still have autonomy. When we're talking about 90% summative means how are you assessing the students to know that they learned? That's what a summative assessment is. Have they learned the material? That's all we were trying to do. I would say that other than Ann Robb, no one that has addressed you tonight has ever talked to me about it. And Ann, I only had Ann go to Mrs. Bishop because she was in charge of special education, and she had a perspective from the special ed view on how we could make this work in special ed. But then she never came to me, she never came to any district personnel. They just all came right to you. They never once asked to meet with me and say, what's this 90-10? I told them about it back in April. Now, whether they were there at that meeting or not, I don't know. But this wasn't a surprise on like the first day of school. I mean, it may have been to some of them. But I told them this is the direction that the district was heading, I told them that we were heading toward 100% summative assessment grading. Earlier, in the elementary school, everything was based on summative, and that wasn't challenged. That's what we said. That was a direct statement in our work session. Hold on, I better get that back out.
You should have been at the first one.
What's that?
Yeah, I said you should have been at the first work session.
It said, summative assessment is the grade you see on the report card. That's what they said.
I think you should check policy that that's allowed on the elementary level, but not on the high school level.
Okay. So that's where I'm coming from. I didn't want to stir the pot. I was just trying to follow the directive that I felt I got from the district. I didn't follow the proper procedure, plain and simply. I'm sorry.
I'll reserve my questions for later.
Okay.
Go ahead, Pam.
Go ahead.
Okay, I did meet with you because I like to hear both sides of the story. And we came out of that meeting and Brad had one interpretation and I have another interpretation. But that aside, okay, I have some major questions, like one thing, we're doing this in 5th grade right now. And that's out of policy, okay? And the board makes policy, good or bad, and we are graded by the people that vote for us and don't vote for us. Now, some of my concerns are, if you go just to taking a test, the majority, not the majority, I don't even want to give a percent, but I know a lot of kids would not pass. Now, here's the problem with that. We're passing them on with 4 Fs right now.
I'm sorry, can I interrupt here for a second? That I feel like we should be having this discussion once a properly produced proposal is presented to the board as per code 1-11 that's coming from either the superintendent or a committee from the faculty senate. Because what we're discussing, we're not at that point yet. If that's permissible, and then.
Some of this stuff is already being implemented.
Well, I have a motion that I'd like to enter. Then we can do the motion, then maybe come back to this at that point, if that's permissible.
In a second, I got one more thing. IEPs, almost every one I've had, it says the student will allow to take the test over if they make less than a 60%. I have given tests to students 10 times, and it drives the teacher crazy because each time you have to grade that. And if you have 20 to 30 IEP students, the amount of time it takes to go over another test, grade it, and then hand it back, it takes up a lot of individual times. And I was teaching in a class where I had the same class all day long. Now, I can only imagine lower classes that have 2 7th grade classes, 2 8th grade classes, and 2 something else, trying to do that with multiple classes. And that's some of my concern with this. I think a lot of our students would see failure in this, but that's just my opinion. Go ahead.
Okay.
I have a motion I'd like to make. I move that the administration will immediately declare and communicate the recent Preston High School grading policy change known as 9010 is null and void because Preston County Policy Files 1-11 and 3-10 were violated. The 9010 grading policy change can be brought to the board by a properly constituted school curriculum committee. Furthermore, let it be known current board policy allows but does not require the 9010 method of grade allocation.
Okay, there's been a motion on the floor by Mr. Tatham. I hear a second.
I'll second for discussion.
It's been properly moved by Mr. Tatham, second by Mr. Kisner. Now for discussion or question.
Mr. Tatham, do you have there the 3-10 that has been violated?
Yes, I do.
Could you read that, please?
Let me find it here. Give me a second. 3-10 is the school curriculum.
I was going to say, that's the school
committee.
curriculum committee, correct?
And so I'll give you a rundown. The school curriculum committee, in essence, it's made up of the principal, it's made up of a guidance counselor, 3 faculty members, as
At least
Mr.
3
Martin
faculty
said,
members.
that are composed of 3 grades. But the key that was not mentioned is they have to be elected by the faculty senate. They can make any proposal they want that affects curriculum and bring it to the board for the board to have public input, public notice, and then make a decision. Here's 310. I'll pass 310 down to you.
While they're looking over that, I would like to point out, I really don't like to see anybody taking the blame for this, because to be perfectly honest, if we're going to take the blame, I learned about policy 310 3 days ago when Mr. Tatham read it to me. I've been on this board for 6 years.
Sorry.
I screwed up because I didn't make you responsible, to follow the policy. But what I think we can learn from here is this is the second go-around with this. It's getting better because it's not near the fiasco that it was the first time. The third time can be a charm. It sounds like, a good idea, but I think what we can all learn from this is we're all in this together.
Yeah.
There's not one of us that can do this successfully without the other entity. Get back in our lanes and work together. Listen to each other, take good advice, be open-minded, and we need to take our county back.
I'd like to jump in here, too. I agree with Ms. Feathers, but at the same time, it's not acceptable to me that this is the second occurrence that policymaking was done at the high school level with no approval from the board. Coming from the December 8th, 2020 issue of the Preston County Journal, Board President Jack Keim emphasized that no such decision to utilize mastery learning came from the board, which has since explicitly forbidden the practice. Also from the same article, the former superintendent said, "I think our grading practices are a problem across the board. The high school, for some reason, jumped into the deep end of the pool without teaching anyone to swim." Policy 1-11 states pretty clearly that the policy-making body of Preston County School District is the Board of Education. The next paragraph says, "All employees are expected to have a working knowledge of and shall be held responsible for following state laws, state board policy, local board policy, and implementing administrative regulations." It's our job to have an efficient and effective school system. Having teachers running around at the beginning of the school year fighting with their administration about how they're grading something and feeling like they have no buy-in and poor morale is not what we need in Preston County. We have basic policies that we can follow, and the policies make sense, that we create proposals that we have buy-in from our faculty and from our administrators, and they're presented to an elected board that can invite public comment, and we can agree upon them or send them back for changes. This is the second strike. But I don't think you were involved in the first one, correct?
Not directly, no.
No.
So that tells me it's a bigger issue than one person, as you said, Ms. Feather. Meaning, this is the second time that we've brought master learning, that we've instituted a policy without it being approved.
No, I didn't
So-
say it was one
so
person. I
No,
said
no,
it
it's, you were, I'm sorry. I'm just saying, this is a much bigger issue.
So
than-
just to be on the same page, and I can't say that, again, I am not for what has occurred. But if you'll give back 3-10, 3-10 to me appears to be, and that was why I was asking, was what in it do you think, well, I was asking Mr. Tatham, what in it do you think was violated? Because 3-10 to me is about curriculum development, whereas the current situation regards a grading policy. So again, I am not necessarily a proponent of what has happened, but I am trying to understand. I do not believe that a policy was broken so far. A stance taken from administration is not policy. It is school policy, but is not part of our policy documents. Again, I just don't want to focus on the wrong thing here. So I'm just trying to figure out, if something in policy was broken, I would agree with you that we would have to null and void it immediately. And I'm not saying that we don't either way, but I don't believe that 3-10 addresses grading policies as far as needing that committee. Am I misunderstanding something?
It's a major policy change. I think that's.
It's a major policy change in
It's
action.
not a policy change at all, though.
It is. When you have every single employee at the high school, faculty member, that currently under status quo can use their professional judgment and training to weight their courses however they want, and that's just how they've been doing it forever. And now we're mandating that you have one way of doing it.
I agree with that.
And when you have students that possibly will fail classes and not graduate, you are looking at a legal liability situation and a major policy change that was not considered by this board. So it could come under 111, where all proposals are presented to the board and we vote on it.
Okay.
That could
Do
be
you have
done that way.
Can I look at that?
Yeah, 310 says that you have the power and the duty of a school curriculum committee is establish the programs and methods to be used in the school. So I think grading and weighting grading in a specific way is a method that we are using.
I think that's under a subsection specifically about curriculum, if I recall. That was just all I was asking. I'm just trying to make sure that
Powers and
we're-
duties of the curriculum team.
Right. Yeah, I saw the 3-10. The 1-11 was the one that but anyways, ultimately, Mr. Seymour, if I may ask.
Yes.
My understanding right now is, from your perspective, you felt like you were just adopting where the administration was headed.
That is correct.
So I guess my question is, are you aware that at the last board meeting, there was major concern from the Board of Ed? In our board meeting?
I found out, yes.
Okay, did you know that before you instituted that? Or
Absolutely not.
I guess I should say, on the Friday when teachers felt that they were told the mandate, did you know before that?
No.
Mr. Martin had not talked with you. I'm asking. I'm not in any way insinuating you're lying. I just
No.
trying to make sure that we're on the same timeline.
Yes.
When we had the meeting on that Monday, and yours, I believe, came instituted 4 days later on that Friday, between that period, you two had not talked.
No.
I mean, regarding this, and I know
Yes,
you guys
correct.
had to talk, but I just.
Correct.
I mean, Mr. Seymour, what I had provided Mr. Kisner was basically provided Mr. Seymour with the video duration of the conversation. And I asked him to try to summarize kind of his procedural process to bring us to where we are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
I just felt
I
like
had
it was pretty
discussed the
blatant from-
90-10. I had discussed the 90-10 with Mr. Watering, but never with Mr. Martin.
Yeah. Well, again, my concern was just Monday we had a meeting, and I feel like it was very apparent that the board had major concerns about the 90-10. So that is, my frustration is, I mean, I felt like that was very well articulated, that we were concerned and would like to have a stake in this. And for 5 days to have passed and this has still been implemented, and that concern not to have ever made it to you.
That was
is kind of.
Their meeting was also Monday, it was right after school.
No, our meeting would have been before that. They would have known before that, because their first day was the 17th, correct?
do I have my timeline correct? Was faculty senate the Friday after our Monday meeting? Is what the
No,
impression that I got
faculty
from-
senate was on the 18th. Faculty senate was on the 18th. I didn't hold it on the, no, it was,
It's 22nd.
I can look it up. It was before your board meeting on the 22nd. So they learned of the 90-10 before the board meeting on the 22nd. Because it was either the 18th or the 19th. I think it was the 18th. We decided to have it on the 18th.
Okay.
So our faculty senate meeting where they would have learned about the 90-10 would have been on the either that Thursday or Friday before the board meeting on the 22nd.
Okay.
And that's where Ms. Robb said she learned about it Friday, and she came to you guys
Well,
on
when she
Monday.
came to the meeting, the way that if I recall, her was like, "Hey, I heard about this today, but I didn't."
Now, she may not have been there on the 19th.
She's not a
because-
full-time regular.
Because she's a long-term sub.
Right. Yeah.
So, sometimes, like, I know Ms. Poland.
Yeah.
She wasn't there for any of that.
Yeah.
And that has something to do with the number of days she can work, too.
Yeah.
Okay.
So then we can move past that. Thank you for that clarification. At this point in time, with you feeling like you were just hitting the direction that you felt like was coming from above, do you feel like, with all the pushback, have you had teachers come to you and say, thank you
No.
for mandating all the other teachers do this?
Nope.
Has any teacher expressed, a preference of this policy?
I mean, some people said they didn't have a problem with it. I mean, some people have said they didn't like it necessarily. But no one ever set up a time to come talk to me.
Okay. And how do you feel that this policy from your position increases students' likelihood of learning?
Okay, so I can't summarize 24 hours or however much time we spent with Myron and Ken, but ultimately, here's the crux of what they told us. You grade on achievement, basically, learning, not behavior. So bringing a ream of paper for extra credit should not count toward a grade, but it does. Okay? Bringing a tissue box counts toward a grade, but it shouldn't. What they said in a nutshell is the only thing that should count is what they learned, how you measure what they learned. Now, again, we can go back to how you do that. It's not just tests. You know what I'm saying? It could be papers. It could be, a teacher can sit down with a student and talk with them and through it. The teacher just has to know that they know the material. However they do that and give an objective grade, not a subjective grade. So that's the crux of what we heard last year for the entire year.
So you're saying that the 90 is not just a test?
No, it's not just a test.
Okay, tell me what the 90 entails then.
It's
What's
a
it
summative
include?
assessment. So I could sit down with the student and say, you know what? Show me how to do this math problem, because I was a math teacher. Okay? Do they know how to, so say the unit's on multi-step equations. If he can sit down and solve that multi-step equation, I know he knows the material. Right? That's a summative assessment. It could be a test in English, an essay, in math, an essay. So the teachers still have autonomy to grade, to figure out how they can grade whether they learned the material. It's not just a test.
So we're in agreement about tissue boxes and reams of paper.
Okay.
We're in total agreement, but that has nothing to do with 90 and 10. That could have been the change is, you're not allowed to give out extra credit for something that has nothing to do with the curriculum.
Correct.
So, and when you go to the teacher has autonomy to decide what goes into the 90%, the teacher always had that. So what do you think changed with the implementation of the 90-10 policy, other than no bonus points for tissues and reams of paper?
I don't know. They said you shouldn't grade homework because homework is practice.
But we're not doing that, correct? Or, well,
Some
that could
people,
be happening.
some people do it. But, I mean, they're saying you don't grade homework because homework is practice.
Yeah.
And you should be able
They're
to practice
saying-
it correctly.
The experts are saying, is that what you're saying?
That's what I'm saying. The experts
Okay.
are saying.
You know,
Well, but I also think this is a product from the experts,
Yeah.
which was given to us by the curriculum director and says, grading is an exercise in professional judgment. That's subjective.
Mm-hmm. Correct.
That's subjective.
It can
not
be.
objective like we're talking about. That's subjective, in which the educator seeks to ensure the grade that each student receives, not earns, keyword, receives, is an accurate representation of their performance. Like,
Right.
So, I mean, going to what you're saying, this is not, this is about subjectiveness, which came to us as part of the curriculum stuff, not objective, which is what he's saying that the professionals were saying.
well, I got a problem with professionals because we've done 3 or 4 different math things in the last 4 years. We keep switching. Math counts, math this, math that, and we're still going down. And every year, like, what's that new program we just did last year where we sent a lot of people to Florida?
The thing that we just, the
Yeah.
conference?
Model schools was supposed to be the answer to all our problems.
Excuse me, Mr. President, we have a motion on the floor regarding unauthorized. I mean, this is just,
Yeah, I realize that.
I'm not, it's valid,
No,
but it's.
I'd like to hear the motion again, please.
I move that the administration will immediately declare and communicate the recent Preston High School grading policy change known as 90-10 is null and void because Preston County Policy Files 1-11 and 3-10 were violated. The 90-10 grading policy change can be brought to the board by a properly constituted school curriculum committee. Furthermore, let it be known current board policy allows but does not require the 90-10 method of grade allocation. May I explain it further? I mean, in
No,
essence,
I just wanted to hear it again.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So as part of the discussion, I will say, in my opinion, I will make a motion to amend it. I don't believe I can support the motion as it stands with it saying there's a violation of a current policy. I don't see that. I don't disagree in the making it, in overriding it with administration, but I don't think, I personally cannot read in that code where I feel like it's been violated, personally.
So you feel that it's okay for an administrator to issue a mandate that employees that the board hires, that they can only weight their grades in a specific way?
I am opposed to that mandate, but I don't believe that they've broken any policy. And I think that Mr. Martin could speak to the historic and norm of an administrator over a school building having authority to set into place policies for running that school building. There is an authority that is given to an administrator. They're not just here for the kids that get sent to the principal's office. They are.
Do we have any example in prior history where mandates were given to teachers on how they construct their graded material in their course, how they weight it, how they have to do it? Is there any?
Not that I can find, Mr. Tatham, other than excluding the.
So,
Listen,
so
I don't have
never
a-
in Preston County history.
I don't have a problem with drawing it, plain and simply. I don't have a problem.
It's already been enacted. I think we're the only ones that can withdraw it.
Well, he can.
Actually, he can is because since he, in my opinion, Mr. Martin, I want to defer legally because I'm not sure I'm right. But since he's done that, I think he can say it's null and void, we're going back and going to the other scale. And at that point, then, if they want to come in front of the board again, doing exactly what the policy says, because I do believe it's
Yeah.
a major policy change. That's the problem. And that's where it's a wording issue, I think, Mr. Kisner and Mr. Tatham. But that would allow
Well, yeah.
could go back and then come
I
forward.
understand that, but I think that there needs to be a public record
Right.
that for the second time
Yes.
that we have policy being made in Preston County schools without insight, approval, or public notice or public comment being
But
made.
it's not policy.
Well, we can take the vote and we can see who agrees
Okay,
that they
now-
violated policy.
I don't know procedural, Mr. Kisner. You were the parliamentarian of the, and I don't, and I'm being dead serious here, so I'm deferring to your past. Can we vote on that? You started to do an amendment. I don't know which one you did.
For the point of discussion, I was sharing that in order for me to support it, I would need to make an amendment to remove the portion of his motion, and I will happily make that amendment. But that.
Then you'll have to have a second to that amendment.
Right, that is correct. That states that there was a violation of policy. I do not believe that in my reading of the policy that there's a violation. I do believe that a very large change was made that I think would be prudent in future of something of this magnitude to be brought to the board for consideration or at least awareness of. I think that would be appropriate. I don't feel right saying that policy was broken when I don't.
So you're just taking out the 1-11, 3-10, and just leaving it vague that policy was violated?
Yes. My motion would be that the motion is as stands, except for the removal of the portion of the motion which says that the two policies were broken. That is the only amendment that I would like to make.
Basically, remove anything after null and void to the remainder of that sentence, correct? Is that what he's proposing now?
I'm acceptable.
Okay,
But you
now-
just need a second, and then if we agree, and then if we were to pass the amendment, then we would vote on the whole thing as a whole.
As I said when I took over, I do not know everything, so I will defer to experts when they know.
Amen. That's what they're there for.
Okay, so.
In this instance, Mr. Hogan, the motion is made by Mr. Tate.
Correct.
No point received a second.
No, it did get a second.
Oh, I
We went to
seconded it.
discussion.
Mr. Kisner
Yes,
seconded.
I seconded it. Sorry.
There has not been a vote.
There has not been. We were still in discussion.
A motion? The,
Original motion.
correct.
Yes.
And it has been
If
seconded.
you've got that written motion, I can read it as I would prefer to amend it for clarity if that would be beneficial. The motion to amend states that if we propose it, the amended motion will be, the administration will immediately declare and communicate the recent Preston High School grading policy known as 90-10 is null and void. The 90-10 grading policy change can be brought to the board by a properly constituted school curriculum committee. Furthermore, let it be known, current board policy allows but does not require the 90-10 method of grade allocation.
I
is
second
how
that.
it will read.
I second that motion.
Okay, I have a question for discussion.
Okay, wait,
Discussion.
real quick. It was motioned by Mr. Kisner, second by Mr. Tatham. Give a second.
Just for giggles, no.
Yes, to be,
Motion to amend the original motion
right.
made by Mr. Tate.
Let me refer to.
Made by Mr. Kisner.
And we get a lesson in
Seconded by
parliamentary procedure, too.
Tatham.
Correct.
Now, are you caught up?
Now
Now for question discussion.
Okay. So when this motion mentions grading policy change, when my daughter gets a report card, what grading method is on her report card? What will I see?
Whatever the teacher says.
No, will I see an M for mastery, or will I see
No,
an
A, B,
A
C,
plus?
D.
Because,
A, B, C, D, F.
okay, so then I have a problem with the motion because and this, I think is what Mr. Kisner is saying, the policy, or the grading policy was not changed. The curriculum in which they get there was changed. But the grading policy, A through F, which is later on in this policy, one of the other, was not changed. Is that correct?
Yes, and that was one thing that I stated through.
Okay, so you can do with that what you want.
correspondence about this is the grading policy, we're still using A through F.
Yeah.
Right.
So we can't change the grading policy because
There
the
was a
grading
me-
policy
there was a
wasn't changed.
mechanism of how you ultimately get to that point.
And don't ask me how to motion that because I don't know, that's all you know.
You would agree that this is something that affects, the grading policy is how it's presented currently. This affects how those calculations are made, so it affects the grading
Grading and
policy.
curriculum are two different things. Like,
I agree,
that's-
and this has nothing to do with the curriculum.
But it doesn't with the grading policy either. The grading policy says A through F.
No, that is
It's
correct.
not how they get there.
And that's why I'm saying that, nope, that he has that the policy put in place by administration did not override our current policy. It added one part of the method that you use to get there. So it wasn't a full grading policy. It didn't conflict, it did not override, it didn't break anything. It was simply changing the method on which things were calculated in order to get to the 90, 80, 70, A, B, C, D, F. So we are saying grading policy in the motion, but not in reference to the actual thing called grading policy in our board manual.
Can we just make a motion to get back to the way it was?
Mr. Martin, do you have any input or suggestion? I mean, as we're looking at this amendment and this motion, like,
I struggled with this in regards to Mr. Tatham's questions. It was to say, for example, the grading policy, and I think I made the very point that was made a little while ago. It's what's prescribed as grading policy simply states we use A through F with the prescribed range of grades that get you there.
Mr.
I mean,
Seymour,
do I think that this is a major change? Do I think this is a major change? Yeah, I think it's a major change.
how did you address it in your faculty senate meeting? What was the directive?
There's going to be there's three categories of grading. 90% summative, 10% formative, 0% other. So in Schoology, because that's where we grade,
Yeah,
okay, in Schoology,
that's what this says, yeah.
there's categories. So I said we will have three categories: 90% summative, 10% formative, 0% other. So it's not, so technically grading categories.
I think the motion
Right.
should reflect what Mr. Seymour.
Yeah. So I mean,
implemented.
that's what it was. I mean,
What'd you say, Ms. Warner?
yeah.
So that's what we need to change?
To reverse, yeah.
what do you mean what we need to change? Are you proposing that you'd like to amend the motion so that it's called a category,
Yeah,
or so it's a calculation?
What we're trying to do is make sure it's done right.
Yeah.
That's ultimately what we're trying to do.
So
So, and I don't know how to word it.
Mr. Martin, did you get to finish your thoughts on it? I'm sorry. I am interested. I just,
As I look at the current motion that's out there, motion to amend the original motion by Mr. Tatum was made by Mr. Kisner and seconded by Mr. Tatum to revise the original motion as follows. The administration will immediately declare and communicate the recent Preston High School grading policy change. That's where I think literally the verbiage policy may be a
Right.
problem.
Okay.
It's more so grading.
That's-
Category change.
I like practice.
practice, probably grading practice
Yes.
would probably be,
Learn as 9 to 10 is null and void, grading
right.
practice change can be brought to the board by a properly constituted school curriculum team. But again, even through the school curriculum team process, I mean, it wasn't a clear, Mr. Tatum, that's why I told you, I was sending this back, it wasn't necessarily a clear-cut item in regards to the manner of that our policy is written. We don't have a well-defined grading policy, or at least I don't feel so at the secondary levels, because again, our grading policy equates to A through F and the scale that's used to determine.
I understand that, but as soon as you mandate a practice, if that's what we're calling it, a grading practice, that this is the only way teachers can set up their course, to me, that's making policy.
And I agree, I think.
And no one has policy-making authority but the board.
And I also agree that it needs changed, only because I still feel that there are still teachers that don't get it. So it's not going to be an effective move anyway. So
Well,
I'm still in agreement.
I understand, but if teachers don't get it, I think we should be spending our time doing what some of the teachers have talked about, and that would be having committees in our schools and having faculty senate that's empowered so that they can get information and that we do training and that we do things properly, such as having a properly produced proposal and discussing it as adults, and then we roll it out properly so that teachers can get it. Right now, they're getting the information right before they start the school year, or in this case, in October, whenever the rug's pulled out from underneath them.
Mr. President, I would move that we amend the motion by replacing the word policy with practice.
Now, you amending your amendment?
You can have up to 2 amendments on any motion. You can't go farther than that without voting and bringing it back down.
Okay, and again, I'm going to defer to Mr. Kisner with his training in that, because I'm not sure. So it has been moved basically to change the wording, correct, Mr. Kisner?
I'm sorry.
You are moving to correct the wording in the motion.
Correct. From changing policy to practice. And I'm sorry if I'm for, what's that? I was going to say, 2 amendments is what I believe is correct by Roberts.
So now I need a second.
I'll second it.
Moved by Mr. Kisner, second by Ms. Feathers. I am.
While he's typing, Mr. Huggins, what we would, I'm sorry, do you need to speak, Mr.
No,
Martin?
I was gonna say this, I'm gonna read this and make sure that this is what the board is seeing. So, a motion was made to amend
The amendment,
the amendment
correct.
by Mr. Kisner and was seconded by Mrs. Feathers to replace the term policy, or replace the term for policy with the term practice. And what the necessary change would read as is, the administration will immediately declare and communicate the recent Preston High grading practice change, known as 90-10, is null and void. The 90-10 grading practice change can be brought to the board by a properly constituted school curriculum committee. Furthermore, let it be known, current board policy allows but does not require the 90-10 method of grade allocation.
Correct.
Okay,
I'm praying there's no discussion.
Vote, quick.
I have to ask
I'm hungry.
discussion or comments.
No.
Hearing none. Call for the vote. Okay?
Started this time.
Mr. Kisner.
To be clear, so that everybody knows what they're voting on, you're voting that we amend the motion. We have to go 2 levels up before we pass this. I vote yes.
No.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, Mr. Kisner, what else I have to do?
So the Second Amendment passes, we're going back to the First Amendment and would need to vote.
Okay, going back to the First Amendment, call for the vote.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
What First Amendment?
The First Amendment was where we removed the portion which said that a policy was changed, or a policy was violated. That was the First Amendment,
Okay.
and we're
yes.
approving that change.
Yes.
Yes.
Before we vote on the next motion, Mr. Ziegler, is there anything that you would like to share?
No.
I mean,
I have nothing to
okay.
share.
Now you would vote on the original motion if you wanted to read it as with the amendments,
So-
or if you just want to go with it.
The original motion, we're voting no.
No, the original motion is now amended, so we're not voting on the original motion. We're voting on the motion as it's been amended. So it's the last statement that Mr. Martin read is exactly what we're voting on. We've now approved both amendments, and we're voting on that motion as it stands.
Okay.
Get done,
Mr.
Ms.
Kisner?
Martin, if you could read that amendment so we all
You want the
understand it.
final, you want the
Yeah, the
final?
final
Final
vote.
version.
Right.
Okay, hold up.
Okay.
It'd been easier to vote no on it.
There's been an amendment
Yeah, you,
made to revise the amendment made by Mr. Kisner, which was seconded by Mrs. Feathers, to change or to revise the term practice for policy within the amendment, with the amendment now reading,
this is what we're voting on, is what he's about to read.
The administration will immediately declare and communicate the recent Preston High School rating practice change known as 90-10 is null and void. The 90-10 rating practice change can be brought to the board by a properly constituted school curriculum committee. Furthermore, let it be known, current board policy allows but does not require the 90-10 method of grade allocation.
That is your motion?
Yes.
Okay, so Mr. Tatham is yes?
Yes.
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 Yes. I think.
Okay.
Um,
I have a
want-
faculty meeting tomorrow, and I'll communicate that.
I want to thank you for coming in, and I think Ms.
And I-
Feathers kind of stated it kind of well. I think we all learned something, and we go from there.
Yep.
And again, I thank you.
Sure. Thank you.
Mr. Seymour. And Mr. Martin.
Yes, that was extremely stressful to get through those amendments. Okay, moving on. Budget journal entries.
Just before you move on, thank you to the teachers who came and spoke. We do appreciate your time, and I'm sorry for such a long night.
Thank you.
Okay, entertain a motion to recommend and approve the budget journal entries 110 through 113, which is the homeless donation, technology fees, ag registration fees, and student testing rewards.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Okay, it's been properly moved and seconded. Any questions?
What is the description, faculty senate allocation? Does anybody know what that reference is? That's in there a lot.
They have to allocate a certain amount of money that there's allocated to staff members, that there's a prescribed amount of money that's given to each staff member to purchase, for example, needed supplies and materials for the classroom. The teacher then just has to submit the receipt of purchase to document the purchases.
So it's essentially supplies at a teacher's discretion.
Correct.
Okay, sorry, thank you very much.
Any other questions? Call for the vote.
Voting's open. Motion passes 5-0.
Moving on, schedule of checks. Entertain a motion to approve the schedule of checks.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Tatham, second by Ms. Feathers. Questions or concerns? Hearing none, call for the vote.
Voting's open. Motion passes 5-0.
Moving on, maintenance work order system update is informational, but at the same token, I'll ask if there's any questions. I would like to make sure you tell them thank you. I think this is vital to us seeing what's being done. And I think it's helped also being able to say they are doing them. So having this maintenance order, I think is important. So thank the proper people, please. Moving on, the MOU between PHS and Preston Memorial Hospital. Entertain a motion to recommend the board approve the MOU between PHS and Preston Memorial Hospital.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Kisner, seconded by Mr. Tatham. Questions or comments? Hearing none, call for the vote.
Voting's open. Motion passes 5-0.
Before we adjourn, just a quick reminder to us as board members as well as the newspaper. Our next meeting is at Brewston at 6 o'clock. I can't tell you, is it the 26th?
26, my understanding from Mr. Knotts, they will conduct that in the school cafeteria.
Okay, so I just wanted to make sure we got that out to remind
They
people.
always feed us.
That is true.
Good food.
You'll probably get some chicken dip from Mrs. Moran.
Okay, so anything else for the superintendent on the next?
This doesn't necessarily have to go on the next agenda, but just know I'm coming for you. Now, we had talked briefly with another board member from
Gilmer?
Gilmer County.
Gilmore, that just recently their county adopted an alternative learning facility and was said to have made the world of difference within their county. So I'll be creeping on you.
I don't know if it needs to be placed on another, or on the next agenda, or if we can just discuss it, but I really feel like 3 months from now, I'm really going to wish that I could watch our first 2-3 work sessions that we've just done about curriculum. Currently, the policy is that they do not get recorded for later use. They get streamed, but they don't get recorded. I would like to see, I think that it would be beneficial if we recorded anything in the future. That way we could look back on it as a resource from those. Does that need to be does that need to be on the agenda, or is that just something that?
I think
Because it doesn't
honestly-
really affect school, but yeah.
I
Mr.
think
Kisner, I
since
can
it's,
place it on there as an action item at the
yeah,
next
because
meeting.
right now, it's not a voting item on the agenda.
Okay.
From what they told us in training.
If we could practice, because we still have the video recordings of our meetings, if we could start tacking them on front of our page again for a couple, just like rotate them out once a month or something, so always have 2 on there so people could drop in or watch it at a later time.
You just want, you're saying you want, they're all available. Okay. You're wanting updates, like what frequency would you like those up, Mrs. Feathers?
It's something I can click on and watch, I don't
No,
know.
but I mean, like, how far back would be?
Oh, no, I'm just thinking like the last, just
Previous
keep the
meeting?
last 2 going, or
Okay.
maybe something like that. The month prior.
Do them all.
I'd say they really don't take up space, it's just the link, but I don't know what it costs us in bandwidth, but.
Is that an issue? Is it costly to do more, or does
The
it
only
take up too much?
issue we run into is better with our current system. It will be I'm concerned when we go out to some school locations, when I have to do the recording with an iPad, you will see intermittent, it'll drop, and I'll end up
Yeah.
with 6 video clips. It'll have everything, but it's broken up into multiple video clips.
Yeah.
I mean, not that we can't do it, but it's, when we're off-site, we're more prone to that,
Yeah.
using the iPads and dependent upon
That's
the wireless.
understandable.
But, I mean, we can certainly do a posting.
I really appreciate them because my note-taking is terrible. I like to go back for reference personally.
Okay, anything else? Anything for the agenda? Hearing nothing, I will entertain a motion for adjournment.
So move.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Tatham, second by Ms. Feathers. Any discussion? Hearing none, call for the vote.
I think I didn't log out.
With the voice vote.
Voting's open. Motion passes 5-0 at 9:38.
That's a record.
No record.
I'd appreciate a reminder